No, if there's anything you present to council beforehand, then we'll go from there.
Yes, okay. So, a couple of things that I would like to call your attention to. You will note that the training and professional development in account number 34.
Are you in the detail book or the regular?
I'm in the detail book. So I think one of the most outstanding things here that we would need to look at is that part of the budget, because we did have an increase. We did budget for an increase over last year.
You want to give us a page number in this?
Yes, I do. Let's see here.
98. In the detail book.
Oh, okay. You numbered them. All right.
Mr. Hartzell, it appears that at least Mr. Zuckel does not have page 98. Do we have? Looks like there's some missing pages. Is it possible to get some copies?
Well, this copy here is on 52.
Yeah, but I'm saying you didn't have the detail page, which is what Melanie wanted to go over.
98 is not there.
98 in his book is not there.
I tell you what, that,
I mean, I have it here. Look, you should have a copy.
I will, you can borrow money for this instance if you wish.
Actually. Or use this one. Okay. You're welcome.
So, in general, we budgeted similar to what was budgeted in 2018. But there are a couple of accounts that there's an increase, that a significant increase over 2018. And so I'd really like to take a look at those. So, training and professional development is one that really stands out. There's a jump in that budget, and the reason for that is that we have not done a lot of training in the city in the past. We've gone quite a few years without doing some of the compliance training that we need to do, as well as leadership training. And as we're doing our listening tours, one of the things that we're finding out is where are there skill gaps, where are there areas that we need to build some skills. And so what you'll see here in that budget item is leadership training as well as training for new leaders. The reason for that is that we typically promote people into leadership roles without giving them the skills and the tools to be proficient as leaders. It takes a different skill set to be successful as an individual contributor than it takes to be successful as a leader. If we are able to begin to help people build their competencies and skills as leaders, then we will, there's long-term impact there. So we have budgeted here. Those are the areas where you see the biggest jump in our budget. Leadership training, staff training, new leader training, compliance training. So this is account 34. Because of the need for training, and we're going to be we're being very mindful about how we offer training. So for instance, we've already started with compliance training for 2018. And in order to save money for the city, we're doing that training internally. So we have a train the trainer coming up next week where we're gonna train members of the HR team. The police trainers are getting involved, the fire trainers are getting involved. And so we'll be able to, we're gonna do this train the trainer, and we'll keep the cost down by doing it internally. So to the extent that we're able to do that and still maintain quality service in HR, we'll do that to keep the costs down. But we do need to begin to help build skills and competencies. When you look at account 26,
Before you go to account
Yes.
26, Mr. Zuko has a question on 34.
Yeah, just so I'm correct here, the increase is $51,600 from last year. It says, 2018 was 30 and now you're going 81.6,
yes.
am I correct? Okay. I'm all about training, believe me. You know, the old saying, you think, ignorance, try not training. But aren't you kind of putting the cart before the horse here as far as training everybody?
Well, we're not gonna train everyone, we're doing a needs assessment. A part of the listening tour is to conduct a needs assessment, to find out where we should focus. This increase will not cover training everybody, but the focus, we do need to train new leaders, those people who are promoted into positions in the last couple of years without any support, education, understanding of what it means to make that transition from frontline employee to a leader, from individual contributor to a people manager. That will be an area of focus. Other training, we will align based on what we're learning in the needs assessment. We really have to prioritize. We're not able to train everybody.
Because that just seems like a lot of money, especially since you said you're doing it in-house.
We're not doing all of it in-house. We don't have the capacity. This training, internal training that we're doing with sexual harassment, it is palatable because there's one version of it for leaders, it's 2 hours. There's a version of it for employees, it's an hour and a half. We don't have the capacity to do all of this training in-house. Everyone who's doing this is doing it on top of their regular job.
I don't know
If
if
we
I'm
have a
not.
full-time trainer, we could do all of it in-house. We don't.
Okay, I guess my question is then, who's going to do this training and who's getting paid this $51,600?
Well, that depends. We're doing a needs assessment right now. That'll help us prioritize, that'll help us focus in on these specific areas, and we'll do an RFP. We will do it at the best possible cost.
Okay, so this would go out to a bid then, in a
Yes.
sense?
Yes,
Okay, so that's not a concrete number then, is that what you're saying?
that's correct.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Ms.
Now-
Zuko, go ahead.
No, I have a question. This training, 51,000, that would be for leadership and so on and so forth. that we-
Yes.
After you do this training, what happens next year? Is it a yearly thing, or would this last for several years and you have to do it again, or whatever?
So there will be refreshers, there will be ongoing performance monitoring, coaching for the first cohort that goes through. But in terms of training for new leaders, that will be an ongoing program because every year we promote people, every year we bring in new leaders to the city. So there will be some aspect of it that will need to be repeated, but there will also be aspects of it that we'll just need to do ongoing performance coaching to keep people refreshed on the skills.
Thank you.
And just quickly to put it in historical context, I've asked some of the people who are here who've been with the city for quite a while when they believe the last time management and supervision training was done. And we're possibly looking at well past 10 years where most of the staff has been trained in supervision and management.
Mr. President, I have some questions on the training budget.
Go ahead, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you very much. Before I get into the specifics, we're looking at about, well, it's $81,000, which out of a $116 million budget, we're probably looking at about 0.1%, somewhere in that capacity. My question for you is this. You've got a lot of experience in the private sector, specifically with HR consulting, and you also have a lot of experience with training in HR. What's a normal percentage that when you were consulting for companies that you would recommend they look at spending in terms of management training for their employees out of their total budget?
About 2.5%.
And we're talking about somewhere in the neighborhoods of 1/100% for the first time in potentially 10 years. Okay. Could you walk through the line items in the detail book for the training, so we can maybe get a sense as to what we're getting for our money? Because I think that's one of the biggest problems, at least for me, looking at the budget book, even in the details, it's telling us sort of what we're spending it on, but not in terms of what the detail of that detail is. So could we go through that line by line, please?
Absolutely. So if we start with, let's see, we're looking at number 34, account 34. So the first line item here is $20,000 for, it's required for the SEIU union contract, that we have a tuition reimbursement program based on the union contract. We are required to always budget $20,000.
So when you say this, are we talking about just general college credits for any of their union members, or specific training for their jobs, or what are we talking about exactly?
It's for college credits.
Okay.
Am I accurate with that? Yeah.
Yep.
It's college credits.
And that's what I was pretty sure on that, but I wanted to double check.
Mr. Robinson, if I could, please.
Sure.
What about the supervisory? They get the tuition reimbursement too. Where is that located? Is that located in the 20,000 here, or is that somewhere else? Sorry, I just wanted to.
No, that's a very good question, yeah.
Yeah, that is a good question. We actually have not budgeted extra for regular tuition reimbursement outside of the CBA.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just interject for a second, I can say that, in my experience, looking back at a couple of years' worth of budgets, you've never gone over budget on this line item. But as Mel correctly points out, it is a CBA requirement.
I understand that, but you're rubbing off on me, you know, when I make sure it comes from the right account. I don't want you to have to do any more work.
It's too late.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And it's also very common that even in businesses that people, you usually don't go over budget because you budget for it and very few people take advantage of it, but you have to budget for it in case they do. In this case, as Jeff said, it's required.
I guess my question just then simply is, if somebody in management in Mesa takes college credits that they get the tuition reimbursement for, where does the money come from?
We would take it out of training budget.
Okay. Mr. Glazer, more work for you.
Thank you, sir. May I have another?
So the next few line items, the Perlis Conference, the SHRM, Lehigh Valley Conference, the National Conference, the IPMA Conference, and monthly meetings. These are opportunities for we as human resources professionals to stay abreast of, new laws that are coming out, new regulations, new guidelines, to be refreshed on what's going on in the HR world, both in municipalities as well as in general human resources. Our human resources team is amongst those who have not had opportunities to get a lot of training for years. The next one, line item, the first one on page 99, leadership training and other staff training. And this is where, as I said earlier, the listening tour is also serving as a needs assessment as we're going through the city, understanding how we can better serve our constituents, which are the employees of the city. We are also finding out what the training needs are. And that's what the leadership training is. The leadership training is also other staff training. For instance, one of the things that's coming, we keep hearing, is customer service training. We want to be able to better serve citizens. There's, and also training on dealing with conflicts, training on legal hiring. These are things that have been coming out in the needs assessment. We're not done. We're still doing the listening tour. And we want to do a comprehensive job of understanding what the topics are, what the priorities are, before we put a real strong plan together. We still have about 5 more places to go with the listening tour. And then new leader training is specifically for people who have been promoted within the last couple of years. so that we want to make sure that when people are promoted, they're prepared and equipped with the tools that they need to be successful as a leader. I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's over 50% of leaders, when they're newly promoted, do not survive. They're either not effective, or they're not able to be, or they're not able to stay in their job. This is not in the city, this is kind of a general statistic. We want to make sure our leaders, as we're promoting people, they're equipped. And then HR and compliance training, this is things like our sexual harassment training. We want to make sure that everyone who's supervising people understands what the HR law is that they have to follow. What are the laws that people need to understand in order to keep us out of kind of legal hot water from an HR standpoint. We've been pretty lucky, but we want to make sure our leaders are equipped. And so that's what the HR and compliance training is.
Excellent, and then we skipped over the number 7, the CLEs, that I assume for
That's for
the Solicitor's
continuing,
Office.
that's for, it's actually, we have to take the L out of that. It was
When
before
it was,
for legal training
Yes.
from my predecessor. I'm not a lawyer. But we do have a couple of HR people working on certifications
right,
that, they just recently started on, but this is training, this is money that can pay for them to get their certifications.
okay, and then the only other question that I have is in regards, sort of follow up to what Mr. Zuckel had ended with. So the detail 8, 9, and potentially 10, we're looking at those will be RFPs that will be put out. And we, as he said, we potentially might not spend as much if it comes in less, and we're budgeting the full amount that you feel might be necessary for all three of those?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much for that explanation. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question and maybe a suggestion. I know you were not here, I know our mayor was not here, and several other people weren't here at the time, but I'm going back when my days on the police department, and perhaps Chief McLean can weigh in here. We were allotted to be able to go to one of our local universities here, Muhlenberg, under the West Coast School program, where they would allow us to go and take courses there. And I think this would be something maybe, and again, not only for your department, but the entire city-wide. Was that open to all bureaus at the time?
I think it was open to the police department. I don't know about the others.
But it was open to the police department at no tuition.
Oh, I know, tuition, wow.
I took advantage of it, as well as a number of my other officers who, I think I took a total of 5 courses there. And they were, some of them were certainly pertaining to my job, they were leadership courses that I picked out. So I think it'd be something, good to look at and see if there'd be some type of program, we could maybe work out a program with them. You got Cedar Crest, you got Muhlenberg here in the city. And it only helps the sales. They'll try C right on.
That's a great idea. I mean, we will look into that. If we can get college credits and college courses or any type of education that's going to benefit our employees, we will go for that. I love that idea. West Coast School's a great school, so I'll start there since they did it before. Maybe they'll do it again.
And I know, I believe Mr. Arcelay actually took advantage and he received his degree from there.
Wow, okay. We'll definitely follow up on that. That would be great. So it was tuition free or the city paid the tuition?
I don't recall the exact details, but I think they allotted us so many positions to go to the courses.
Okay.
We didn't fill it, as I recall, but. It was tuition free though. Was it? I believe it was, so many.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. I'll look into that.
For all bureaus and people to take advantage of.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay.
So
Just one question, it's more curiosity than anything else. What's the Brain Shark subscription on page 98, number 6?
I have that one too.
Under account 32, yeah, but it's line number 6 and under 32.
Account 32. Okay, there it is, yes. Yes, publications and memberships. Brain Shark is a tool that you can use. I've used it in my past life. It's a very powerful tool. And it's a tool that you can use to develop training items that you can use ongoingly. So here are some ways that we want to use this tool. We're building a real full-blown onboarding program. And instead of just having people come in, sign their papers, we want people to understand who key players are in the city. We want them to understand how to be successful within our processes. So instead of having to redevelop training each time, this is a program that you can take a PowerPoint presentation, convert it into an actual training program where you can ask questions, where you can test them, and you have this learning object. You have it forever. It's not something that you have to keep doing over and over. It's not something that you have to bring a trainer in face-to-face all the time. It becomes a learning object that you can email it to the person, and they go through it. It becomes an e-learning object. And when you look, if you price a variety of different tools for developing remote learning, Brainshark is very inexpensive. It's very user-friendly. It's the easiest one I've used, and it's also one of the least expensive ones. And we want to make it available, we want it for HR, but we will make it available. Once you have the subscription, anybody in the city, any bureau can use it. So for instance, if you want to train, SOPs on, doing an inspection, a building inspection, you can build that in a Brainshark very easily in a matter of a few hours, and then you have it for every inspector. So once we get that, it'll be made available to anyone who's doing training across the city.
One of the things we could use it on is what accounts to use for what things we purchase.
I'm gonna reserve comment on that one. Okay, anybody else with questions here? On those accounts?
None of those two, so.
Mr. Glazer, do you want to wait till the end?
I will wait till after all the council people, yes.
No, I meant, okay.
Well, I'll wait till everyone up here is done.
I think everybody up here is done.
I have questions on other accounts. And with those two accounts, I'm finished, but I have some questions.
Do you want to wait till she's done with human resources, Jeff, and then ask the questions, or do you want to go with the individual accounts? I mean, you can chime in.
I will wait until, and for all these departments, until council has asked all their questions.
Okay,
About every account.
okay. All right, you can continue.
Those are
Sorry.
really the only significant changes from the past budget. Everything else has been really kept within pretty much what was budgeted in the past. Those are the primary ones that have changed.
Okay. All right, where do you want to go next? We're gonna
Do
do.
you have questions though?
I have just three questions on three other accounts.
Three others that you have.
Yeah, that we haven't touched on. Since she said there wasn't much changes to them, I just.
Okay, then why don't we just ask the questions? We'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. President. Account 46 in the
Detail book.
on number 4, the job study, we're budgeting an additional $10,000 for the job study. Can you give us sort of an update as to what the status of it is and what time frame we're looking at on that might be?
Absolutely, happy to do that. That was one of my top priorities when I came into the city. And so as soon as I got here, I started meeting with our consultant. Did not realize it had been going on for so very long. It dates back a year. And so we're in the final stages. I put together I did a Gantt chart and some timelines and really pushed our consultant to get to the end of this project. We are scheduled for completion in the middle of December. We are meeting with him again on Friday. And the consideration on Friday is we already have all of the jobs generally priced, but what we don't have yet is, we don't have market data to compare it with. That we do on Friday, and then the following week we look at potential structures for how our salaries will be laid out. We are scheduled to finish this project mid-December.
Okay, but not
The
before
10th?
we'll be finished with the budget though.
Right. Now, we did set aside another, we have proposed 3% to be
And
set
set an
aside.
additional $340,000 aside in the general
Exactly.
civic fund, right. And I know we can get to that. So if you're looking to be finished with it in December, why are we budgeting $10,000 for it in 2000?
There could be some additional need for either tweaking, reviewing, if we're adding, new jobs, it's for us to, if we need some additional consulting work with him.
Okay, great. The next detail on line 5, temporary service, can you expound upon that a little bit, please?
Yeah, that's another big jump, right? I missed that one, sorry about that.
That's all right.
So, as we're doing our listening tour, one of the things that we're hearing is that people are having have in the past had a hard time, connecting with HR. And part of the reason is that we have been so understaffed, like every other department, and we did not have anyone answering the phone, sitting at the front desk. In the past, that has been a part-time position. And it still is a part-time position. So we have someone there now. And what we'd like to do, this person is half-time, she's from first thing in the morning until noon, and we would like to be able to bring another part-timer for the afternoons, so that when our customers call, they have a person to talk to. Somebody who, the front desk actually processes some of the more transactional things. And so part of that is being able to keep someone at the front desk to help manage the traffic that comes in. The other piece of that is interns. We'd like to bring in some interns. There are some projects that we really would like to get done so that we can function as a more effective and we want to outline our processes, and there's just things that need to be done that we just don't have the capacity to do, that we'd like to bring in interns. So it's the front desk and it's interns.
Okay, is there a reason why you have it as temp service and other contract services as opposed to additional money put into temporary wages? Because I don't know, I can tell, I think you agree with me by the head bobs.
We'll move it, I don't know, I'm figuring this out as I go.
Oh, no, I
along,
understand,
so,
I just didn't know if there was a reason for it.
Nope.
Okay, would
I
that be
just put it
something?
in the wrong place.
Okay, so then we could make that as a sort of a friendly amendment, perhaps, Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely.
Great,
Temporary wages.
great, excellent. And then the only other question I have is, because I didn't quite understand the description, was in 50, line item detail 2, it says test rentals, fire and police may spend in 2017, if not then needed for 2018, plus FOP, CVA up in 2018. Just maybe sort of a better explanation of that.
So when we do the civil service testing for police and fire, we rent space.
Okay. I thought that's what it was, but I was not 100% certain, so I wanted to double check myself.
We'll fix that to make it more clear.
Well, as everyone knows, I was out last week with a little bit of vertigo, so it might have sort of screwed me up. I couldn't read it right on the page. So, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir, but now that you brought that up, that brings up another question. The FOP just gave the test this year.
Right, and we'll do it for fire next year.
Okay, yeah, that's sort of, 25,000 is pretty high for rental.
I think a lot of the supplies and things that are needed are baked in there. They may not, that might not be the right line item for it.
There you go, Mr. Glacier. That's what we needed. What's that? We're running short. Okay, any more questions from council?
I just want to expound on Courtney's question about the temporary service, 35,000. Now you said that was to expand for the other half of the day that we don't have someone, plus another assistant,
Interns,
an intern.
just, yeah, interns for specific projects.
Okay. What, The interns, are they paid? They're paid?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, we're gonna leverage the interns that come in through Mr. Glazer's office, but we also need some additional intern support.
Okay.
The ones through Mr. Glazer's office are not paid, so we'll leverage that, we will leverage that, but we also need some additional interns.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else from council? Mr. Glazer.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yours.
I was able, through diligent work, to get my questions out in advance, and I thank everybody, all the departments, almost all the departments tonight, for responding in a timely manner so that I could review them. First question that I had for HR was in 26 in printing, really regarding the printing usage for IT, and this is going to be universal throughout the whole city. As council knows, and everyone knows, we purchased printers this year. They got delivered in May or June, and now every department has, in their 26, has a printer usage per IT, or something very similar to it. And what I've noticed, and I think I'm correct, and if I'm not, I'm sure I can be corrected, is that the PO that went out to encumber money for all the departments, the amount of money was figured on a yearly basis, okay? Even though those printers are only gonna be there, they're only gonna get billed for 6 or 7 months of the year. So what I've noticed is that, assuming that the numbers are accurate and we can have some confidence in them, is that most departments are over budgeting their printer usage for IT for 2019. In HR, they're budgeting $2,200 for that amount, but the PO for this year is, IT estimates it'll be $1,200. Now, just to clarify things a little bit, and Matt, if I say anything wrong, just let me know, please. If we use black and white copies, they're 1/2 cent a copy. If we use color copies, they're 3.9 cents a copy. So I would certainly encourage, and IT would certainly encourage, and I'm sure the managing director and finance people to use black and white as much as they can. You know, the $1,200 that they budgeted gives you, you know, like 22,000 copies. I think that amount of money can be reduced. What I would encourage is that all this managing director and finance and the mayor to work with departments to take a look at those numbers before the end of budget season to see whether the pencil can be sharpened a little bit on this number. I know each department has different needs, but I think I have confidence in the numbers that they've come up with, and I would feel a little bit more comfortable if the departmental numbers were a little bit closer to what IT suggested. And these are evidence-based numbers because they were asked for usage, and the department was asked for usage previously. If the numbers were a little bit closer to what IT suggested they are. So, you know, once again, I hope everyone could go back and take a look at that.
Yeah, we will. I mean, it's high because we're doing training, and one of the ways you can keep the cost down for training is to do your own materials.
So noted, you know, at $2,200, that gives you 44,000 black and white copies, and that's a lot of copies per employee. I just think that, you know, the administration should take a look at that. I had also questioned something in account 32, the Lehigh Valley Business Partnership for medical. Mel and I had a little bit of back and forth on that. She suggested that could be reduced by $1,000. I think we can do a little better.
And we will look at it again. I put a meeting on your calendar to look at it more
Okay,
closely.
that would be great, thank you. The next question I had was about, in 34 for the CLE, which is continuing legal education. The prior person that held the position was a lawyer and needed continuing legal education to keep his license in good standing. You know, once again, I would ask you to go back and take a look at that.
It's gone.
Thank you.
No, that's a good point. No.
Well, and Mel made a good point also, is that she'd like to do, that department has suffered from, A, from turnover and B, from a lack of training. I am very hopeful that under strong and steady and informed leadership that we have now, that we can really invest in capacity there. But I think, and apparently the mayor agrees, that there's probably enough funds in the budget for next year that you can address those needs without just $3,000.
Okay, we'll take it out.
Mel and I also had a great discussion about civil service. Some of those costs are spread throughout the personnel budget, but by our chart of accounts, all civil service costs, which include police testing, which include legal services for civil service, should be in the 50 account. I asked if those costs could be clearly labeled so that when we look at the budget and the public looks at the budget, they can see what is attributable to civil service. And
Absolutely, yes.
work on that. There had been some charges for Lexus service that HR paid at a variety of accounts last year. I asked if they were going to be used in next year, in 19, if they could be clearly budgeted. And if you don't expect to use that service.
I do not. That actually was also based on John being an attorney.
Right.
Our solicitor's office has LexisNexis. I have not touched it since I've been in this position. If I need something from that, I'll ask the solicitor's office.
That should save us about $1,200.
I did ask the solicitor's office to look at anyone who was using that to see if we could consolidate that.
Okay.
Subscription.
Also in 50, there was a rug service listed for $1,800. Mel has said that they won't be using that service, so we can deduct that $1,800.
Yes.
We had some discussion about their 68 account, which was increased a little bit. And I think upon reconsideration, Mel thinks that they can sharpen that pencil a little bit and reduce that to $8,000, so we'll save another $2,000 there. And some of my other questions for to HR really had to do with getting expenses in the right account, and we can have that discussion. I know Ms. Wagenhurst will have to be involved in that to address it in the budget amendment, but those were my questions, and I think they were well addressed by HR, and we managed to save a little money as well.
And thank you for getting them out ahead of time. It really helped.
So noted, and it's my aim to do that when time permits. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Glazer. You want to go right into risk management?
Yes, sir.
We can just pass right through it and be done.
Yeah, sorry. This isn't the normal.
Nice try, but I was a cop, and I just drew attention to yourself.
So again, with HR's department, we work together, put together a small presentation because we know risk is something that everyone pays attention to in the city. So again, if this works. It's not working.
No, Mike's not.
So we can go ahead and just, again, we're looking back in 2018, the successes that we as HR and risk combined together. If you hit the next one. So come out, we restarted our accident safety committee, next slide, next bullet. Electrical training, which was needed throughout the city. Again, forklift training, which are almost 70% complete, and everybody be certified. Thank you. Asbestos abatement, we're actually in the process of writing our operation and maintenance plan, because we are covered under, thank you. We are covered under EPA and that, so we have to meet those recommendations, those requirements. Our accident driver kits, meaning it would be more diligent when we have accidents, taking pictures, make sure we get the proper police reports, identifying who's at fault, not at fault, taking, and continue to do that, which you'll see that we did have some call savings in 2018 associated with that. Improving our exposure control process, joining the cancer committee with IAFF, working on the Presumption Cancer Act, and partnering with them on that regards. Continuing with safety training, electrical equipment, making sure our electricians and people that are handling electricity are properly, have the proper PPE on. Job safety analysis, and then last, this year, we ended the year with a 37% reduction in our auto loss account, for the first time in, several years, and that's due to, you know, partnership with Public Works, every manager taking accountability for their employees, restarting the accident review board committee where Dale Treader, Daniel Steckel, and other members sit on, making sure we deem what's preventable and not preventable. So again, when we came up with the framework of our strategy going into 2019, we came up with a vision where, you know, we want to positively impact this risk and safety of all of our people and the community. Our strategy is very simple, is to be innovative, sustainability, and then also compliant, and then plan, accelerate functional improvement, accelerate risk and safety performances so we can have stuff to grade on. So again, one of the things is to increase participation risk management has under this administration with the Solicitor's Office and the partnership that we have created with the Solicitor's Office, which has been key, and I think will be a difference in the future for us. Going with the predictive analytics approach when it comes to cost containment, reducing or minimizing losses, identifying our exposures, improving our data mining, and being financially responsible with the taxpayers' money. When we look at the improvement, it's creating the strategy sessions we are having now as a partnership with this administration, with the Solicitor's Office, has been very key. Everyone's been very helpful in the office and keeping risk in the loop, which has been probably before. So improving the risk assessment and using insurance to fill the gaps when needed. Focusing on identifying, categorizing, and weighing options. And building confidence inside the council, the administration, and everyone as a participant with this. Again, we want to talk about the emergency coordinator position where we put into the budget for this year. Again, you know, this position is very key into what we're doing here in the city, especially when it comes to the opportunity for reimbursement of funds. These are some of the examples that's had happened over the last several years when we had somebody in that role as a limited approach versus the role which is now required when you look at the FEMA standards and PEMA standards. Again, you're talking about grant funding that the city receives currently, opportunity that we can due to when we have this person in this role, that the hazard mitigation funding, to be able to find a backup generator. And then the potential of the future, with, you know, new lines of revenue, new lines of grants that we're not even aware of because of our interaction, because of us taking the city of Allentown to the next level when it comes to being able to be out there and identifying our hazards and risks, not only from a community standpoint, but from a city standpoint. And we have several examples over that the last couple of months. And the way this country is going, every day we have some kind of issue on the news that you can read about. So being able to have somebody ready to go in that position, be well informed, trained, and that be their dedicated position with the city, and it reduces its liabilities in the long-term perspective. And then when we talk about our functional excellence, the goal is 2020, right? Where do we see ourselves at in 2021? When I started this position in 2017, I took over for a gentleman named Leonard, as everyone knows, who started this process in 2015. So all we're doing at risk is building on what he started and taking it to the next level. Again, creating a one city mentality when it comes to speaking on risk and safety, ensuring that we don't divide ourselves into, you know, silos and work inside ourselves. We're breaking down those barriers and continuing to work together. And that's it.
Okay, I'll open it up to council. I guess the first question I have is the permanent wages from 2018 to 2019. I would imagine that includes the emergency management coordinator.
Emergency management coordinator also we are split in a we call it, the financial analyst. That's gonna help us with a predictive model when it comes to lawsuits and other things in the budget when it comes to risk, looking at it from a predictive analytics approach versus a reactionary approach. Coming to council every couple months has been very exhausting, asking for an increase in our legal fees. So us being able to work together with that, having that person in there, managing that, helping set up that process so we can ensure that we're being financially responsible with the city's money going forward.
I would also point out that in previous years, the risk management personnel budget has been spread across 2 bureaus. We combined it into one this year, so you will see in Bureau 2 a zeroing out of those funds, which will explain a portion of why that increase is as much as it is in Bureau number 1.
Explains why the insurance is doubled too, right? Thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else from council?
Yes, another question. Account 04, line 1, the safety intern,
Yes,
currently in college, would be a 3-month assignment, so that's 480 hours, am I correct?
yes.
Okay. And you have budget $15,800, that's $32.91 an hour.
Well, it's gonna be spread out over longer than a 3-month period. It's actually gonna spread out over the 2019. We don't plan on using it. We are gonna look at other options. But as you know, the city, from a safety perspective, we have a lot of programs, a lot of PPE to go after, to get us to that next level. So using an intern who's fresh out of college, wanting to cut their teeth into this environment, is a good opportunity for them.
Yeah, but at $32.91 an hour?
It won't be that much, as I think we did whatever the national average is. I think it was like $15, $16 an hour.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Mr. Robinson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Jeff, for a good presentation. I have a question on the revenue side. And 6210, so the active employee benefit reimbursement. So last year we had budgeted $300,000, and that was also the adjusted budgeted amount. And then the actual amount we're looking at is $450,000, and then a budgeted amount again of $300,000. Could you just explain why it was so much more than the budgeted amount, and also why it's still budgeted at $300,000?
So that is where I let Mr. Hustle take that piece from the revenue side, to help me, but I know from a risk perspective, we're getting more aggressive, working with the solicitor's office, especially, when it comes to getting monies back from the city when people damage our guardrails, going after those insurance companies, taking advantage of those opportunities we have in the city. When we have chances to recover money, we move on it, we don't sit around and wait for it. And then on the retiree side, I'll let Mr. Hustle speak more on that.
Oh, the risk management revenue, okay. Hold.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
I will get back with you on that one to see where, because I know that 300 is what we have traditionally budgeted for it. We had an expectation of it was a higher amount with A&E this year.
Okay.
I think it may have been just a one-time bump up this year.
And that's
caused
just,
that.
I was
But
curious
I will verify that for you and get back to you.
what the reasoning on that was, but, okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Hartson. On the expenditure side, so I don't know if this was just me, but in my detail book, it jumped from account 16 to account 36, so there was no detail for account 32 or 34.
Yeah.
And especially with account 32, since we see a large increase there, I was curious what the details on that were. If that's something where you need to get back to us, that's fine. I didn't know if it was just my book or if it was, okay. All right, so yeah, if you could maybe just get back to us with that, maybe send something to Mr. Hanlon as to what the details on that are. Okay. Account 36, the line item, so we see, we're looking at from a budgeted amount, we were at 463,000. The adjusted budget amount was 509, and then we came in at 452, but now we are budgeting 580,000. So I'm just curious if you can give us sort of an overlay of what happened this year and why we're looking to budget it at close to 600,000 for next year.
The main reason is the increase in the cyber insurance.
Yep.
When I'm working with the vendor, right now is our premium opportunity to get cyber insurance because of it being a brand new system and everything the city went through with its recent malware attack. We can get at a very financial responsible version of it versus waiting a couple of years and then might have to pay an increased premium on it. And it's gonna have almost a $3 million threshold on it that we will get assistance where if we ever receive a malware attack, we have some funds to recover.
So how, could you maybe just walk us through, Jeff, how that might work if we do get this and let's just say we have another attack? Is it just a standard sort of similar insurance reimbursement type
Yes,
of
sir.
situation?
Just like what we had with the flood a couple of years ago on the 5th and 4th floor.
Yep.
Basically what will happen is that the insurance carrier will pick up the tab up to $3 million, but if we'll see funds have to get kicked in.
Okay, and the $50,000 that you're budgeting, I assume similar to what we talked about with the training, this is for an RFP, could theoretically come in under that? Or is
It could
that,
come in under that, but it's not an RFP. We have
Oh, okay.
PhD that's already our insurance carrier.
I'm sorry, I see what
And
you're saying. Yep.
they're the ones that go out and quote those for us.
and then is that going to be a relatively standard increase in that account year to year?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. On account, oh, I had my head down, Brad, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. The detail for 32 and 34 you will find in Bureau number 2 under workers' compensation. It was not in Bureau
Okay.
1. This is another one where it's split across 3 bureaus.
Okay.
So the detail for 32 and 34 is there in the workers' comp.
All right, well, I'll take a look at that, and if I have any questions on that, I'll let you guys know. Count 44, let me see where I was here on this. So can you just talk about, so obviously, you know, we're looking at a large increase in the legal fee budget, obviously appropriately so, because I think we were under budgeted last year with what we looked at. Can you explain your reasons for the breakdowns? So we're looking at $600,000 for police liability, $300,000 for general liability, and $100,000 for workers' comp.
The reason why we broke it down like that is to give more of an oversight of what that account has. And basically our idea is behind that is to try to figure out how much we're trying to spend when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to general liability, when it comes to workers' comp. So that way in the future we'll be able to get to that level to give more accurate number than we have in the past. Currently, you know, we have exceeded that $900,000 that was allowed already this year with a couple handful of cases. So versus just constantly coming back, let's try to put what our risk is really in the budget so we can get a good realistic look of it.
Okay, and, could you just, Jeff, for my education, because I don't quite know how this works, can you talk to me about when we have an issue, let's just say it's in any one of those 3, how we go through the process of selecting who outside counsel will be if we need to hire them? Are you involved in that? Is that just from the solicitor's office? Is it a combination of working with you guys
It's a
together?
combination of our insurance carrier and the solicitor's office.
Okay.
They're able to speak more on that.
No, I understand. I just figured while we were here, I
Yeah,
double check on that. I'll definitely
Yeah, I
bring
just
that
come to
back
insurance
up.
aspect of it.
That works. Okay, so we have that. And then in 68,
Yes, sir.
so we are looking at a large increase in the 68 account. Can you talk about what we're looking at here specifically? And also when you look at it from the budgeted amount from last year, 3,500, it went up to 38,000 for this year, and then you're looking at 27,000 overall for the year. Can you sort of talk about what happened this year and then why you're looking to budget for it that way next year?
When we went back to our strategy and the 5-year strategy plan that we created, one of the deficiencies that when it comes to is the type of PPE our people are using. We really have no true assessment completed. People are just buying certain items and don't know what they're rated for, is it appropriate for the job. Additionally, on top of that, we're talking about additional training when it comes to more specialized training, such as arc flash assessments, when our guys are working with electricity and stuff like that. We have to make sure that we train our people appropriately to make sure they're ready to handle the job when they have to do it. So it's more about the city becoming more responsible when it comes to setting up our safety program and the individuals involved in that safety program to help them.
Do you have, as part of everything you're working on, have you put together sort of a matrix to determine if the training is having an effect on workers' comp? claims over the course of a few years.
It's still in its beginning phases because this is the first year we actually.
But you are
did it.
putting that together.
But we are putting it together so we can show the risk versus reward. down the
Fantastic.
line.
I have just one last question, because you touched on the financial analyst and working with the idea of doing the predictive,
Analytics.
thank you, couldn't think of the word there for a second, on lawsuits. Are we gonna be looking at establishing just a single matrix that would encompass all lawsuits? Or are we gonna design one that we can take into account individual peculiarities of a certain lawsuit to determine, so maybe in lawsuit A, all the factors involved means we wouldn't fight it because we determined that it's not worth it. But lawsuit B has all those same factors, but there's an X factor in there that maybe means we would want to fight it. Could you maybe just talk a little bit about how you're designing that matrix?
So in the end state, our goal would be to have where we have a certain case that comes before us and we're able to accurately predict where we can set a reserve on that case.
Okay.
And try to get to that number. Ideally, we're trying to set this process out like the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier is never in it to lose money.
Of course.
Right? And so they tell us when to settle our claims, when to settle this stuff, and make sure it never reaches the deductible. So when do they know that? We don't know. And that's the path that we're taking. Because there's information obviously out there. We need to go that route to better ensure the city's financially responsible with its money.
Okay, so we are looking at doing this in not just sort of an overreaching matrix, but really taking each individual lawsuit for its own merits as we do the analysis. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate all your work on this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Mr. Hendricks?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to expound a little bit on hold on a second here. Permanent wages. You mentioned about the analyst and the EMS coordinator. Do you have a salary range for both of those positions?
We do. But it will be finalized once the pay study is completed. But we do have a range that we put it in. I think it's,
First one. 197.
I believe the EMC position was quoted between 42 and 55,000, and they were split in the financial analyst with the finance department. And then also have
Salaries
a,
are split across both bureaus.
yes, sir.
And the EMS coordinator likewise?
No, it'd be all risk,
And do you have a range on that that will?
42 to 55,000
Okay.
a year. 42 to 55,000, we believe, without the final pay study information.
That's gonna be a full-time position or a?
Yes, sir. Entry level position,
Okay. And the analyst is just,
full-time as well. Split between two bureaus.
At
Right.
a 10N.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Blazer?
I might.
I'll certainly defer to you, Mr. President. No, you might answer it.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think Mr. Nelson gave a good presentation this evening about where he is and where he wants to take the city, and I'm certainly impressed from my vantage point with the proactive actions that his department is taking for the city employees and their safety. I did have a couple of questions. I got them to Jeff in advance, and he responded, and I'd just like to highlight one or two. On page 198, which it's account 36, which is a breakdown of the various insurance policies that the city takes out. Number 4 is the crime bond insurance policy.
Yes.
This policy turns out to be a 3-year policy. We paid a premium this year that takes us really until 2021, so we don't need to budget it again until that. So I suggested to Mr. Nelson that $4,700 could be removed from the budget. He agreed, but noted very thoughtfully that the item number 4 should be there with a 0 appropriation so that we do not forget about it.
Yes.
And I think that's a good idea. So $4,700 can be removed from that budget. the only other thing of consequence, was in the workman's comp, which is in, would be on 201. If you go down to 36, which is property and casualty, item number 2 is for an insurance EHD. That for $15,250, and that apparently is a duplicative of charges that are listed elsewhere. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, it's actually in the 46 account in both programs.
So we can reduce that budget by $15,250. And that's all I got, and I thank you, Jeff, for getting back to me so quickly. You were number 1. If there was a prize, you would have gotten it.
All right, I'll take it. Just remember that next email.
I will, thank you.
Let me just ask a question on this emergency management coordinator position, and I don't care who answers it, but, and I see the fire chief back there, there's nothing personal against you, but we've had, in the past, the fire chiefs have been the emergency management coordinator. Number 1, what has changed in NIMS to prevent that? And number 2, have we lost any reimbursement because of not having a specific position for that?
The reason why we went the route we went is simply because of the fact that the more requirements that's behind what the fire administration currently is in its state now. The EMC position is more of a full-time position when you look at it from FEMA standards when it comes to recoveries, but not only what you do inside the community and preparing for active shooters, preparing for any kind of mass casualty of anything. We have several big arenas, including ASD. We have the hockey arena, the baseball arena, and all these things that weren't taken into effect when we combined that job into 2. So really what we're asking is an individual to take on 2 full-time jobs in its current state in order to protect the city and its future liabilities. And that's why we took it out of that department and put it under risk. Because it's not just for the fire department, it's actually for the entire city. When we look at health is involved, EMS is involved, police is involved, any number of bureaus can be involved, purchasing is involved. So we have this person, when we touch on so many departments, it's an opportunity to do the right thing. And it was recommended by the PM and director as well.
When that sells out.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I spoke with the head of FEMA at a conference recently, and he was surprised that we didn't have a full-time person filling that. And his recommendation is that you really need somebody to look at it overall. And if you think about it, what we've been talking about, both with HR and risk, is they go hand in hand. The more we train, the more we prepare, the more we reduce our risk. Thank you.
I understand that, I don't have a problem with that, I'm just wondering, because we're asking for you're asking for 1.5 mil tax increases, and we're increasing positions.
If I could, I think the biggest piece we could look at is the potential revenue increase that we can have with this individual being a true full-time position.
And that goes back to my question, the second part of my other question is, did we lose money last year because we didn't have somebody in a full-time position because it was handled by the fire chief?
We had an individual that did a lot of hours and put in a lot of hours. Was there revenues missed? I can't say, because all we know is the stuff that we really got, but is there potential to increase it? Yes.
Okay, I'll leave it there.
I'm sorry, Ms. F., I have a follow-up, but
You mentioned FEMA, do we lose, by not having risk management, do we lose anything from FEMA or any of these,
No, but in their book that they put out.
people are nodding yes back there?
Jim.
So yes, so you take the possibility of the health department right now with having an EMA coordinator gets around $300,000 a year in grants. Without a person in that position, the health bureau stands a very, very strong possibility of losing that grant money. There's also other grant fund money that's out there that the city tends to lose without having that coordinator. One of the things that FEMA and PEMA both say is that the EMA coordinator, years ago when it was, kind of came out, it wasn't really, I don't want to say an important role, it was an important role, but there wasn't a whole lot of aspects to the position. So fire chief, police chief, somebody that was appointed by the city could do the job. Anymore, nowadays with the way the society is, the federal government has stepped in and has required a lot of places to do hazard mitigation plans. The only way that they can get these hazardous mitigation plans approved is through an EMA coordinator, which is pretty much a full-time position to have that person do. So it is kind of recommended that anymore that it's not fall in the hands of a police chief or a fire chief, because they're gonna be directly involved in whatever incident is going on, whether it be a terrorist incident, whether it be a weather incident, whatever the incident is, they're gonna be directly involved in the incident, which means that they won't be able to fulfill their position as an EMA coordinator.
Yeah, just so I can understand this myself, the bombing that we had, I understand that the chief of police has a lot to do with the fire, you have so much to do and so on. So this emergency coordinator will be coordinating almost everything. Is this exactly what it is? Because your job is, as a fire chief, you're fighting a fire or directing or whatever you're doing. Is that, am I understanding this?
The emergency management coordinator gets more stuff, coordinates more stuff with like other entities, like the county aspect of it, gets more,
Something that you
resources
wouldn't be able to do as a
for
fire
research
chief.
from the county. So if I want to request something from the county, anymore the way that it's set up is I cannot, or the police chief cannot request anything from the county. It has to go through the emergency management coordinator, who then goes to the county management coordinator, who does and I can't think of the term right now that's called.
Unmet needs request.
Thank you. Unmet needs request. That's my voice in the back. An unmet needs request, who has to fill out that form to take it to the county, who then takes it to PEMA, takes it on, so that we can request whatever resources we need.
You've answered my question, thank you.
Mr. Zuko?
Yeah. You did mention this, about the county has an emergency management coordinator. Why can we not go through them? I know you're saying it's gotta take certain steps, but why that?
We have to have our own, we have to have our own. We have to go through it, we have to go through them, but it has to come through, it has to come from the municipality emergency coordinator to go to the county emergency coordinator to be able to do that, hazard needs, what was that formula?
Unmet needs request.
Unmet needs request.
So you can't ask for it, is that
I
what you're
cannot
saying?
ask for that, no.
Not without.
Not without being certified as emergency management coordinator. But if I understand it correctly, to be like, you have to go through a lot of classes, to become, the coordinator and all that, but you also have to be appointed and approved by the governor, if I understand it correctly. So you guys can say that if the fire chief is the EMA and he retires, and I take over as the chief, you can tell me that I can be the management coordinator. However, if I'm not officially appointed, then all the grants that the Health Bureau gets, all the other grants that the city gets, if something with like the car explosion, I would have never been able to get some of those assets that we got because I'm not appointed. So that's the biggest thing.
Can I add to that? And I know it may not be appropriate for me to step up and say this, but you've asked what we've lost. We've lost for everything we haven't applied for. Because this position isn't applying for new grants. Because the fire chief is busy and the police chief is busy, and these are specialized grants, and they're out there in preparedness. And my grant could serve as matching grants to some of them, but we haven't applied for them because we can't have a fire chief or a police chief who has enough time to generate that kind of support and data. We have poor data because it's an add-on to a position, and you know when it's an add-on to a position, it means that when you've added something on, it means no one wants it. So it means everybody does it after they do what they really do, and that's part of our problem. So I wrote down on a piece of paper here, and I know I'm gonna date myself, all the police chiefs and fire chiefs that I've worked with. There's 15 names here. The appointed position turns over. The lower level position doesn't. And we've had no continuity. And thank God we stepped in and tried to save the day, and we've come light years. But we're gonna have transition. So we have to get that position, in my opinion, to be stable. And to me, that could leverage a lot of money if it would be. Not to mention the fact that it's getting really scary out there. So the things that they are seeing, as they're saying, isn't specific to health, fire, and police anymore. And the other thing is, we're really fortunate, because right now our police chief and our fire chief get along really well. And we have one really good team. That isn't how it's always been. So when the police chief and the fire chief don't agree, this person stands in the middle and says, I'm the emergency coordinator, this team does this team does this team does this, and if they don't listen, that goes to the administration to fix. We haven't had that. So I think this is a critical position. And I wouldn't have come out tonight for somebody else's budget unless I really believed it was a critical position.
As far as the grants, I'm sorry. As far as the grants go though, our city grant writer can't apply for those?
Think about this.
I'm asking.
Think about this. No, because you need that specialized training. Like a city grant writer's not gonna know that cops really need millennial masks. Cops are gonna know that. So this person has to work among those first responders to write that specialized stuff.
So I'll explain some of the grants this way. I can apply for the grants, okay? But when it goes to the people that approve the grants, when they see fire chief on there or the police chief, and they see that, they understand that there's other avenues that the fire department, police department has to be able to go get funding, to be able to go, one of them for us is called an AFG grant. So when they see that, they kind of put your grant down at a lower priority. If they just see EMC, coordinator, emergency management coordinator, anything like that, they actually put that up on a higher level, and that's the way it was always explained to me. That because the emergency management for the city, for the entire city, is now requesting that grant. They see the fire chief, police chief, and they think, well, it's just, they're gonna use it for their department, not the entire city. So if you have that one person, now it's gonna be applied to the whole city, and that's how it was explained to me and how they look at it when those grants come in.
If I might, I think Vicki makes a great point in the fact that if you look at the chiefs, they have been revolving doors at the time. So if you give it to them, then it goes out the door, we gotta start from scratch. The other thing from my point of view as a managing director is we have a fairly young crew that is now at the director level. So do we want them to work on the peripheral things, or do we want to learn and become excellent in the jobs that they're in? And that takes time. So the more peripheral things we add to those positions, the more it takes away from their true function, which is leadership and management. And from my perspective, I'd rather have them focusing on the core of what their business is, so they're excellent at what their primary job is. And I'd hate to see somebody who becomes the emergency coordinator walk out the door 2 or 3 years later. We'd like to embed that inside the city, that there's some longevity there and it does stay with us, so that base knowledge stays with us.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple quick things. Chief, you sort of touched on this a little bit, but roughly, and if you don't have this answer, maybe you can get it for us. Roughly how long would it take for, whether it's you or one of your deputy chiefs, the police chief, anyone else, to get the certifications they need to be able to do this position?
So I can tell you that I've been working, there's a basic certification, there's the advanced certification, and there's your professional certification. Just for me to get the basic that I have right now, took over a year.
Okay.
For me to get it. Can you get it sooner than that? Absolutely.
But not without.
But a lot of it is computer classes.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have the time to be able to get on the computer and do it, which I don't have.
Right.
And you have to attend classes. Now, you're at the mercy of FEMA, that when they hold those, or FEMA, when they hold those classes. So you're at the mercy of them when they hold those classes, and they only hold those classes, I don't know, maybe once a year, twice a year, you know, it depends. I'm waiting for a class right now, that I think the last time they held it was a year ago.
What I'm trying to get at is basically, so right now, we don't have anyone in this position since the retirement of Chief Lawbacher. And I'm basically trying to say that if for whatever reason this would get eliminated, it would take a significant amount of time for a current city employee to reach the level of training that they would need, as opposed to if we create the position and can hire someone who currently already possesses the training.
Correct, and not only the training, but the institutional knowledge
Oh,
of
absolutely.
the position itself.
Right, and which is.
And what to do in certain regards. When the chief retired and I took over, I had no idea that you needed to do certain things, or the health bureau was gonna lose 300,000.
Right.
I didn't know that.
Well, and then the other, because I know this has traditionally fallen on the person who wears your uniform. I would also say, Mr. McMahon, how many other departments in the city with 100+ employees have a single clerk to handle their paperwork?
I can't imagine there's another one.
Can we verify that just to make sure? Thank you. Because I think it's also a statement of when you say that you don't have time, I think it's important for everyone to understand why that is, and it's because for whatever reason over the years, the fire department has not received civilian support staff in the way other departments have, which requires you and the assistant chiefs and the deputy chiefs to do a lot more work than other counterparts per se in the department in terms of secretarial work and regular paperwork. So I think when we look at that, we also need to take into effect that if we are talking about trying to maximize the potential revenue that a position like this then can create, I think it's also to be taken into account that the person in your position is already spending an inordinate amount of time doing day-to-day paperwork. So I think we need to take that into account as well. And one other thing is, Mr. McMahon, could we perhaps, over the next 2 weeks, try to find out how many other third-class cities in Pennsylvania have emergency management directors who are separate from either the police chief or the fire chief?
Sure.
So we can see where we are in terms of.
And I believe Bethlehem is one of those.
Bethlehem does have one, and I think they also have a staff person that works under the.
They have to.
Two, okay,
They did.
right, and a city with significantly smaller population right next door. So, but if you could get that information.
Events we have here, in the city, going with all these festivals, blues, barbecue, whatever you call that thing, you know, car shows, all those good things.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mr. McMahon, and thank you, Chief, for your information. And I just always have to say thank you to Ms. Kistler, because she's always the voice of reason. So. And thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, anybody else?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one observation on my part. It would almost seem to me that this would be a position that would almost be cost neutral. And in fact, it may be beneficial to us to have it. We may end up getting more money than the salaries cost us.
I think if you have somebody that works on this full-time, who has the time to be able to research and look at other revenue sources and ways to apply for grants, absolutely. I think Jeff put it the best just a few minutes ago when he said, when the question was asked about how much we have lost, nobody knows, because we don't know how much we can gain, because nobody's ever been able to put the time in to be able to do this on a full-time basis.
And I think it's certainly worth the expense for this year, and we can certainly see at the end of next year just how much we did benefit or didn't.
Or,
And I
yes,
have to bet that we're
absolutely.
it'll be to our benefit. As I said, we have far too many things going on in the city right now. I think this is a very worthy position and much needed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Council? Sorry I opened that can of worms, but we have to answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Lavin will now explain information technology department.
All right, I always put the mission in the slide deck because this stuff has to last longer than just tonight. In case anybody picks it up, I want it in there, but we're not gonna explore that. So, as I said last year, and I've discussed with Mayor O'Connell, technology connects this whole community, whether people realize it or not. As the years go on, everything that comes out of the IT department touches more and more of this organization. Joe asked me to look back on some specific things back in 2005, you know, where we've gone in 10 years. I know our budget's certainly grown, but we still have the same number of employees as we did in 2005 and 14. You know, I know you have a budget memo in front of you that's asking for a staff increase, and we're gonna get to that point. But the point is, IT is almost a lagging indicator here, because when I hear the fire chief talking about, you know, seeking more grant revenue and growing our functions, they're gonna come to IT and ask for something, most likely. They need an email account, they need a computer, PC, they need to connect with others, they need to store files. So many things find their way into the IT budget that even I can't foresee. But that's what that slide's about. So, some accomplishments. It's been a horrible year. I usually have a longer list, I think. I think the phone system that we put in this year, which is not 100% fully operational, is the crown jewel accomplishment of the year for this department. It will save the city money to the tune of about $32,000 a year. But it's not just about the cost savings, and I think we can actually do better than that over time. But we've increased the functionality, the portability of people. We've seen a number of disasters this year that disperse people all over the city. You know, city officials need to stay in communication. Now our phone system is portable, and you can effectively take your desk phone anywhere on this planet and remain connected for less than you were spending for the 15 or so phone systems. We had a different phone system in each building that you couldn't even, well, we paid for some expensive service to make it connect as if it was one phone system, but it wasn't. We had no metrics. If you needed to pull phone records, which at the time when we were you know, going through all of our Pulaski trial and all that fun stuff, we couldn't pull any phone records, and a lot of city business got conducted out of the technology ecosystem that we provide here, which was one of the reasons, you know, one of the many. I mean, 311 was one of the initiatives at the time, and I know we're not really pursuing that at this point, but we just had no intelligence about our phone usage here, other than here's how much the bill is. So I don't have to elaborate, I think, on the security overhaul that we went through this year and continue to go through. We have a new all-in-one copy, print, scan fleet, as we call it, printer fleet. We got a Fraser contract that cost us something like $130,000 a year. We bought the equipment for ourselves for about $85,000, and now we just operate it. And Mr. Glazier pointed out what we've tried to help people understand about people's print usage, you know, and we'll continue to do that to bring transparency where people ask for it. I know everybody's familiar with the SWEET program. you know, the way I look at it from the technology side is we want to improve the quality of housing in this city. And in the few council meetings that I do attend, it's not uncommon to hear somebody in here complaining about a landlord or something like that. The sweep application that Mr. Harper uses was written by a one-man IT shop vendor that they hired 10 years ago or something like that. He doesn't want to take care of it anymore. And, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about risks tonight. We've lived with that risk for a long time. The fact that we had one person that could take care of that one application, quit at any time, and basically throw your whole sweep program into jeopardy. And, you know, Tom's been lobbying me for a few years now to say, hey, do you think you guys can take this over? Do you think you can take it over? So we found time to take that over this year so that that application not only will continue, but will run better than ever and integrate with all the new security stuff. It's portable. It actually has a mobile component to it now. You know, I have no fancy pictures to show you, but ask Tom about it. He's one happy customer. The other thing is we work with Gartner to understand the metrics of our IT department, because I knew I had to come in here at this point in the year and ask for more money essentially for this IT budget. I mean, it's no secret that it is up. So I give you 3 key metrics that, you know, essentially the largest consulting firm in the world with IT has a massive database of you know, other benchmarks out there for industry and state and local government. So you can see IT spending as a percentage of revenue. Allentown is at 3.1%, state and local is 4.1%, and industry operates at 6.2%. IT spending per employee, we spend $4,316. State and local is double that, and industry even more. And the last one, IT, FTE, full-time equivalents, as in full-time employees, as a percentage of our total employees, we're at an anemic 1.8% versus 3.9% for state and local and 5.4% for industry. So those are what I need you to keep in mind when considering what I'm asking for this year. So challenges ahead, staffing. Inadequate staffing is your greatest risk at this point. In the middle of August, I guess it was, we lost one of our employees to another employer that had 10 years experience here that was helping with the malware recovery. And it's unfortunate because that pushed our schedule back. Knowledge walked out the door. You know, all because we couldn't pay him, essentially. And we're still waiting for a job study. I've lost a senior system analyst last month in October. And I don't know how many people know Joy Nicholson, but Joy retired after 30 years with the city. She started off in the finance department here, knew everything about how this place was built. So she's now gone. We need to figure out how to replace her and her institutional knowledge. And last but not least, Mr. Schaefer, who's our IT operation manager, is going on a year-long military deployment starting Monday. So, and another person that had 10 plus years experience at this city. So when I get to the end of this and you see my org chart, what it looks like now and what I need it to look like in the future, we've been sort of lopped off at the top, except for myself. So definitely a big challenge. So security, we need to keep up. Some of the increases in that 46 account, if you're gonna ask me about them, are the things we discussed this summer, but we can't call that expenditure that we did this year, and I like to call it an investment because I do feel that I've set this city up for at least the next decade, if not decade and a half or so, with respect to its security posture, but it's not done. You don't just do it in 9 months, and you need people to keep it sustained. Balance between keeping the city running versus the new technology projects, which I don't have new technology projects. As I said, they come to me somehow. I did see in Vicky's budget, since you're here, I saw she has a medical records system in there, I think, which we have discussed before, but I never know what you're going to fund year to year. So when I'm putting my budget together and I'm talking to all my peers across the departments, it's always somewhat of a game to figure out, well, are you really going to proceed with that or not? And what kind of resources do I need to support you? So we're trying to find our balance there. And I need people to have those relationships, because as you'll see when I get to the org chart at the end, I'm essentially the relationship manager for all of IT. Not that Gerald behind me is not, because he certainly is to the end users every day, but there's a lot to keep up with in changing the city, and we are definitely stretched. So system and app evaluations, we have over 120 servers. We inventoried 2,500 applications that run in the city. I boiled it down to about 120 of those that actually make this business, tick, that are really essential. And then I got an email this week that said, "Hey Matt, who's my go-to person for this app?" And when you have 100+ apps to take care of, I don't have a go-to person. We have a department that is trying to keep up with everything that everybody needs to run the city. And you'll hear them say that they're inadequate, and yes, some of them are obsolete. Our police department, we have 3 members of council that worked in the police department. We're running the same software that, I can't remember if you were all here in 07 when we cut over to that ISIS system, but it was inadequate. I don't want to say it was inadequate the day I went in because you need it, but I don't think the guys like it very much. It's not what it could be. So there's no shortage of those challenges, but we do keep it going. We're very lucky we kept the city running all this year. So knowledge management, business intelligence, I call those our opportunities, because to the extent that we can share the knowledge, record the knowledge of these employees, with things like Melanie's discussed with learning management systems, all that training stuff. I'm looking forward to working with her to record all that stuff, because I will not be here forever either. And somebody's going to take this over at some point. And succession planning is not anything I heard discussed tonight, but I realized after working my tail off all this year that I would be doing a disservice if I didn't come here and present a new plan for staffing for IT. Because when I'm not here any longer, I don't want anybody saying, well, he didn't do anything about it. Increased demand for cloud applications and services. So we've seen a lot of companies marketing direct to departments. They like to go around IT these days to essentially sell their services. It's just something we need to keep. It's another thing I need to keep up with, because what happens is then our data goes places that we don't have visibility to anymore. Not that there's anything really wrong with that, but we certainly need to understand it from a risk perspective on, where are we storing authoritative information about employees, or, whatever we're storing, building information, things like that. All right, so, did I go too far? Yeah. Priorities: maintain existing services, rebuild the IT workforce. So the specifics of that are, we're net adding 4 new full-time employees, taking our head count from 14 to 18, and I'm making changes to 6 positions, which I couldn't have done this summer, just because we were in the midst of trying to recover this place. But I've had time to think about it, and that's what needs to be done. Completing system rebuilds and replacements, unlocking the value of the technology that we have here today. This budget that I've presented is not adding any, besides the Microsoft stuff that was already in there, is not adding anything new, to change anything about how this city runs. And of course, supporting business unit priorities is always our thing to do. Couple financial highlights: reduce the equipment fund spending by $120,000. I mentioned the phone system transition will save us $36,000 a year. The Microsoft licensing and the Premier support line item, which will allow me to have a phone call to somebody should another malware incident happen again, where we need somebody to hunt down the threats. That's what that Premier support contract is for, as well as proactive services. Not just on the infrastructure side, not just in security, but business analytics and things that I think you all care about that we've discussed in the past that I did not get to this year. So new positions that I've proposed and staff changes that came out in this budget today. I guess I have the wrong number on my slide because 375 is what the budget memo is. So if you take a look at the IT 2018 organization, you see we're pretty vertical. As I said, we have no more joy. We like saying that. Mr. Schaefer will be leaving for a year, and he should be back next October. Yeah, I think everybody has this in your package.
Well, I know we have this in our packets, a budget, but we're all confused about this budget memo you've referenced a couple of times, and I don't have it.
Budget memo too?
Yeah, we just got it, it should be circulating.
Number 2. Because I noticed we have budget 1 and memo 1 and 3, but I didn't know it was 2.
It's up there. It's up there.
And one other thing, not to interrupt, but I had asked the other night that any presentation pages be numbered, so it's easier to question.
Sure.
So I could take care of that for the future. And just, on one page for the accomplishments, you have it saving $32,000 a year, and for the financial highlights, you have it saving 36, the phone system.
I saw that too.
Yeah. Oh, now we got
And I
the
think,
memo.
and I'm under promising, and I hope to over deliver, Roger.
I hope so too.
So, these are the last 2 slides. These are the last 2 slides. Okay, this is the current organization. This one, the yellow boxes down in the bottom are the deletes. The blue ones up there are the ones that are affected or new. Because I've had, people who picked up a lot of skills this year that are still here, and I need them to fill those roles. And most people worked many months out of this year, way out of their job description, and they're effectively brand new employees fulfilling new roles in the department. So that's what it looks like. I'm ready for questions.
Page 102 in the detail book. Line 18, Aruba Wi-Fi warranty support. That doesn't mean somebody's going there to get it, correct? We'll open it up to council first.
I think it's a fair question.
Aruba was bought by HP last year. But Aruba's the Wi-Fi radios that we have in our ceilings.
I thought it was a silly question, but since the controller thinks it was a good one.
I thought it was good.
Hey, it never hurts.
I honestly don't like disclosing what specific manufacturer equipment we have, but.
Right, I kind of figured that. Mr. Zuko?
Yes, thanks, Mr. President. Page 103.
Detail. Yep.
Yeah, detail note, I'm sorry. Account 50, only one there, credit card fees, $60,000. What's that for?
So, the way the credit cards, I should have said, we are gonna get the credit cards running in 2019. We came up with that number actually a year ago, and I believe it's still correct, but you can't estimate which cards people are gonna swipe. There is a certain charge, so we have a contract to do credit card processing. It's effectively in suspension right now, we're not being charged because I'm still not PCI compliant and able to turn those up because of what happened. But, you know, an Amex card is the most expensive card to swipe. Visa, you pay a certain amount, MasterCard, you pay a certain amount, and Discovery, you pay a certain amount. So that number is to cover those fees. I can't propose new fees, and we wouldn't do that as part of the budget, but I think the administration's intent, once we get that system operational, is to charge a convenience fee, which would effectively negate that $60,000. But you have to have it there because the credit card company is going to auto withdraw it from our bank accounts. If we choose to collect the fee for that service, we can offset that $60,000. But that is my estimate of what it will cost.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, I'll go through the questions that I prepared first, Matt, and then I want to come back to the new positions that you have. This sort of touches on the new positions with the fact that I know Jason starts his duty and, was it Dan? David, thank you. Has just left. I was curious, you know, obviously I see what you're planning to do in the future, but how you're dealing with, especially Jason, since he'll be theoretically back in a year, how you're dealing with that workload since obviously we can't replace him per se. So what's your plan to deal with that for the next year? Because I know it's an important position for you.
The plan is to leverage the state of Pennsylvania's IT staff augmentation contract. So there's a company called OST Global that I can essentially requisition a certain amount of dollars and give them a job description and say, I need to fulfill this role.
Okay.
And we effectively rent somebody for the year.
And that goes back to, in the, I think it's other contract services, yes, the number 5, the contractual staff augmentation, $200,000. So let me ask you a question. So we talk about that specifically with Jason. That $200,000 that we have there, theoretically, if you had to use all of that $200,000 for this, what, I don't know the right way to ask this question. Basically, what would we be getting for that? So in terms of a number of staff people or here's a better way to ask the question, I apologize, because I'm sort of trying to form it in my head. That $200,000 is the total amount that we have potential to use. So we know Jason's gonna be gone for the majority of 2019. Out of that $200,000, what do you think would be realistically spent to have someone to augment his position?
The quote I got to cover Jason was $160,000 a year.
Okay, so this is $200,000 for the staff augmentation. Not a lot of money in comparison to if we need to replace multiple staff members, basically. So,
That's correct, yeah.
okay. All right, so that actually takes care of one question I had in the beginning. You sort of touched on the question I had about the phone system installation and the metrics of it, so that I'm good with. So in account 32, we're looking at line 3 and line 5. So line 3 is the data domain / Avamar backup software maintenance, and line 5 is the Source Direct Dell SAN maintenance. So with both of those, with the malware incident we had, how confident are you feeling with our data backup moving forward? Now, we have the new security procedures in place, but basically, I guess what I'm saying is, what are we gonna be doing differently now than we were doing at this time a year ago with the money being spent for those?
The, specific, so the Avamar, let me answer that.
Sure.
That is essentially, it's a appliance. So kind of Mr. Glazier and I get in these discussions about, is it software or is it hardware? It's both. We want to make sure we're paying out of the right bucket. But it is maintenance to operate that system.
Right.
We had the folks in from EMC and Dell just a few weeks ago. And part of that $12,000, they do at least an annual checkup. So it's performing actually very well.
Great.
We are not expected to outgrow the storage capacity of it in 2019. We are on a growth trajectory since we put it in. We put it in, it was 55% capacity, and maybe we're 65 right now.
Is that something where it's similar to the other forms of usage? There's a percentage of it you never want to cross because of your growth. So you want to keep X number of percent that you add capacity before you cross that number.
Exactly, which is why they keep a check on it for us.
Okay, what would that number be? So you're saying we're at about maybe 65 now. When would we need to start looking at adding capacity?
It's probably 85 or 90.
Okay, and with our growth trajectory, roughly when, obviously things are going to change potentially, but a best guess that you think might be when we have to start looking at that?
My guess would be mid-2020.
Okay.
Which means we would have to sort of plan for it next year, but the thing's only been in, Gerald, do you remember?
It's probably early 2016.
It's been in about 2 years. So you extrapolate that, maybe we'll get to 21.
Okay.
And you got to couple that with, so one of the insights I do get from that, it's a great slide presentation, but I know it's a little geeky and that's not what we want to do here. But the comment was that we're backing up, I don't even remember how many terabytes, but the point is, on whatever the frequency is, daily, weekly, because there's different frequencies of things, 90% of what we're backing up doesn't change. It is old data. Well, there's a lot of data to be unlocked here, right? We've read those stories about what are we storing in here? But I don't have the insight either into, I'll use the police example. The police department used to keep their evidence, well, I guess in file cabinets, honestly, before the technology. Then, when we got a Windows environment, sometime in, after Y2K, a little before or after something like that, we began to store evidence on the big network file system. Now we have a evidence management system. So we've got evidence spread across paper, traditional file system and dedicated evidence system these days. Could we do a better job of sort of lopping off the stuff we don't need? Probably everywhere we could do that.
Because that's something
Which
we're
is one
looking
of
to your
the
staff.
reasons I'm asking for more positions to get into some of those things.
No, it makes sense, because your staff has gone through a lot of upheaval over the last year in terms of everything you've dealt with. So I have a question here. So when we're looking at line 5, which is the Dell SAM maintenance, line 9, the HP Alpha hardware maintenance, and line 10, which is the backup power supply, plus I would also add what we're costing to cool the servers. Have we ever done a cost-benefit analysis between keeping our own servers running here versus looking at some form of the government-level cloud and moving a lot of our processing offsite? Have we ever done a cost-benefit analysis to see what would be better?
Sort of. Absolutely. I don't know if it's as simple as you stated it.
It never is.
Ask that question and get that answer back. You might do it system by system.
Okay.
So let's let's talk about body camera video. So we made a decision to store body camera video here.
Right.
And could that be better stored in the cloud? I'll tell you, it's gonna cost more to store up there.
Well, that's kind of what I'm looking at, to basically say, we know we're on the right path, and here's why we know it, as opposed to just saying, well, we think we're on the right path. That's sort of what I was looking at, in terms of, because I know that's a major decision, was to keep that data from body cameras in-house. And I would support that decision, I think that's a smart thing to do. But I'm just curious if we're looking at it to basically determine from a cost-benefit side, yes, we know that this is cheaper for us to continue doing it this way.
So we do pay, and as part of that, Microsoft, in the license agreement number is a certain amount of compute, they call it compute, network, and storage cost to use the government cloud provided by Azure, which is, their product. We just have to be judicious about what we put there, because I didn't budget to put the whole place up there.
Oh, no, of course, and that's kind of where I was going with this, was the decisions that you have made as to what data goes there, what data doesn't go there.
Yeah, and honestly, one of the first Microsoft conversations in those early weeks was, how much of this do you really want to keep running here, Matt? Because we'll take it all. Of course they would.
Of course.
And there's a calculator to work on some of that stuff, but you just don't have all the answers as to, well, do we need to store this data? Do we not need to store this data? We've got to work with, every department in the city to understand, can you delete that? Can you not delete that? What's your legal requirements? How many copies of Pulaski's emails are still around here? Are those cases done? I mean, as I was saying about the relationships I need to manage, I mean, when we get a new solicitor at some point, or even working with the team we have, it's like, their requirements in that law office are just, they're one of our exponential growers. So I'm just trying to keep up.
So sort of in a follow-up, if, let's say for a minute that the new staff positions that you're looking for, they go through, your reorganization of the department goes through as is that something that with an increased level of staff and a redesignation of staff that you're going to continuously look at to try and maintain that balance and determine what should be cloud-based, what should be internal? Like a regular running sort of assessment of that, to see if there's any cost savings.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to happen as we look at those system assessments and applications as they get replaced. But I don't see our financials going anywhere anytime soon. I don't see our police record system going anywhere,
No, absolutely, I just want to make sure that we're continuously looking at that type of stuff for any type of cost savings or efficiencies. This is more one of, I didn't quite understand the budget detail and I'm curious about it. Line 15 and 16, the undelete server and the secret server.
Secret server?
He's gone, oh my goodness, all right. So Secret Server is a enterprise password manager.
Okay.
So as you can imagine, we have hundreds of passwords that actually run the services in the background. So this thing keeps them changing on a frequency in an automated way. And that's why it's called the Secret Server.
Okay.
Now we have it, it's not a secret anymore. And undelete is simple. If somebody deletes a file and they call the help desk, they want their file back.
Okay.
So when you delete files across the network, they don't go in your recycle bin.
Okay. I was curious if it was going to be something that simple. I wasn't 100% sure, but it's good to know that I wasn't too far off. Line 14, the network security auditing. So I'm curious if we have, the Microsoft agreement includes some of this, if I'm not mistaken, too, as well. And so I have two questions in this. Number one is this the same firm that we were using prior to the data breach? And if so, has there sort of been a reassessment of what they were doing to see if it could have been caught? Number one. Number two is how, is this something that's redundant because of what we have with Microsoft, or are they both needed?
Both needed.
Okay.
This is not redundant, actually. What this product does is actually watches all the files on the file system, and if you touch it or the mayor touches it, it's logging it. And
Okay.
This is how we know, when Mr. Zukel and I work in the same department and he deletes the file and, I get a help desk call that says, Matt, our file's disappeared. First of all, we have an undelete so we can get them back. But we also know that between the 7 or 8 of us here, who deleted it, so we can correct that.
Okay, so this is more about tracking what city employees are doing in terms of all our files here.
It keeps us aegis compliant for the police department.
I was curious, when it's explained that way, absolutely, it just, in the description, I wasn't sure if it was a redundancy, since we had the new additions with Microsoft, but from your description, it's not, so that's what I was curious about. Line 17, the exclaimer, what is that system?
Exclaimer is a cloud service that stamps our signatures on all of our emails. So when we all send an email to somebody, Exclaimer is sort of plugged in. It's within the Office 365 world, because our email's up there. So Microsoft opens that third-party ecosystem they create for their partners, and that's what Exclaimer is.
Okay, thank you. President McLean sort of touched on this when he asked his question about Aruba, but so what's the difference between line 18, the Aruba Wi-Fi warranty and support, and line 22, the wireless network management system maintenance?
So 18 is the actual warranty and support on each device.
The physical devices.
Physical devices. 22 is it? Yeah, 22
Yes.
is the server that makes all those devices talk to each other.
Got it, okay. Line 23, the firewall license and support. Is that 26,000? And I think you touched on this before, and I apologize, Matt, if you did, when you gave us our briefing after everything happened. That $26,000, that's an annual 26,000 now, correct?
That is a new annual 26,000 because we had a capital expense out of this year's equipment fund to purchase that appliance, which you need to pay continually to have it.
And that's what I thought. I just wanted to verify that. And I'm just curious, how do you and your staff, are you satisfied with it so far? You feel it's doing a good job?
I think it's doing too good a job, if you ask me.
So, it's just good to know that, it's good to know that the products we went and got are satisfactory.
Yeah, there's no shortage of complaints that people can't do their work because we're preventing them from doing it. Which is why I need somebody to manage it.
Right.
More people to manage this network.
Okay, so in account 46, in line 1, so when we're looking at the internet circuit provider 1 and 2, how much capacity are we getting, and do you have a metric to determine of the capacity that we have available, how much we're utilizing? If that's not something you have available tonight.
Well, I can tell you, we have two 40 meg circuits. So if you have a cable modem, remember I don't know, it depends, like Fios is 100. I don't know, mine at home is a 25 meg cable modem. RCN has some faster ones, I think, but we just upgraded to 100, actually. And thanks for bringing it to my attention because I did want to get that in here. I think we can reduce that number.
Okay, great.
From 71 to 50, because I just discussed it with Jason yesterday.
That's fantastic.
Excellent. There's not too many of those in there, but that is.
And the reason I was asking about that, because it sort of ties in with what I said earlier about the capacity and the percentages of it. Is there a percentage that you're trying to keep us under, and if we start reaching that percentage, we might need to look at expanding capacity? I'm just sort of curious of any type of capital outlay we have to look at in the near future.
It's not a capital outlay.
Well, I'm not sure how to
The city's
classify.
operated with dual 40s for 5 to 6 years at this point. But we've moved to, Office 365 in the last 3 years. We have departments using a lot of cloud web-based services these days. So that's why, I'm not sure what date they're gonna up our circuits to 100, but it's coming very soon.
Okay.
And the phone system too. I mean,
Yeah,
we have a
because
phone
it's
system
VoIP,
running on, so So, yeah, we left that in when we submitted this,
Okay,
because it was 71, but I'll tell you, because we paid for, these Elfiq device, number 20 up there, that little device, these internet load balancers, allows us to go negotiate amongst the, all the internet providers, because I think I can plug up to 3 of them into that thing. And, you know, I could say the 2 of you that give me the best price are the ones I'm gonna go with. So Jason has been able to bring down the cost
that's fantastic.
with that. So
Excellent.
there's a great example of buying one piece of, you know, gear that saves you money somewhere else.
That's always a good thing that I like to hear. The admins, the annual software maintenance, is that for your staff for the administration accounts, or is that something different? The number 3 one.
Number 3, admins is, yeah, I mean, that's pension system.
Okay.
The lien system for the law department, it's not for us.
Okay.
Yeah, we just manage that vendor for them.
Okay. I had those, we've already, the staff augmentation. The line 8, the Lucidity, I'm not gonna pronounce this right, the Lucidity work order system, what is that for?
Lucidity, the work order system, that's mainly public works, parks, tech services, over the, well, which is public works.
Okay, I just wasn't sure, because I know we have a number of systems on Eden, so I just wasn't sure what system that was in regard to.
Right, Lucidity is more of an asset-based system.
Okay.
So, you know, your streetlight maintenance, your sign maintenance, your pavement maintenance, all that asset-based type of stuff, that tracks the work against those assets, as opposed to Eden, which is
Right.
mainly financial.
The website consulting and support, line 9, what websites is that for? Is that just for the city website, or is that for additional websites other than just ours?
It is just for allentownpa.gov or anything that runs on that server.
Anything that runs on that, okay. And so the managed firewall services, so we have the next gen firewall license and support in the previous account, line 23. How does this line 16 in the other contract services, how does that relate to those, the managed firewall services?
So number 16 there, under 46, is if we don't get these positions, we need to pay somebody to manage that firewall.
Okay, so this is theoretically a cost that if we would add the positions, we would no longer need to have in the budget. Okay.
Potentially, we're
Right,
possibly waiting for new quotes. So that is a annual number that went into this budget, and Jason is, I know he's only got 2 days left, but he is trying to get me a month-to-month proposal so that I can sort of bridge the gap and not have to sign up for a whole year. I don't know whether that vendor's gonna come through with that for us or not, but.
All right, great. The only
So
other.
reduce it if we come to a, conclusion about what we're gonna do.
I have one additional question, but first I just want to say, you and your staff have had tasks this year that I couldn't possibly imagine, on top of your day-to-day operations. And I just want to thank you and your staff for all the hard work you put in. And I also want to compliment you on, I know that last year you sort of introduced the 311 app as just a, hey, we only put a little bit of effort into this and see what we can do. I received nothing but compliments about that app and its efficiencies and how well it works. And I can't tell you the number of people when I go to Crime Watch meetings that compliment that and are really ecstatic with it. And I just keep seeing more and more people adding that. Matt, so I just want to say you and your staff did a fantastic job on that. I know that you sort of off-played it last year as, hey, it only cost us like $300 to do this, so think of what we could do with more, but you did a really great job with that, and I just wanted to let you know that. The last question I have is, so we talk about how you got the Eden system, and then we also have the Lucidity, which works for the public works side more. Is there a way, and I know this is sort of a throwing a new project at you type thing, but is there a way across those systems that we could institute some type of, sort of like how you have the IT tickets? So that basically if a citizen would call in with a complaint, if they go through the website, the 311 app, they mention something to a police captain at a crime watch meeting or call our office, is there a way that we could basically log a ticket that would either, something that could cross Eden, cross Blue City, cross any other system, so that any complaint would have a number generated to it, and then we could track who's looked at it, similar to how Eden can say, this person still needs to sign off on it to go through the process, so that we could do a better job of customer service in tracking potholes, complaints, noise complaints, stuff like that, independent of the police department and their complaint system. Is that something that's feasible, or is that not particularly feasible because of the different systems and the amount of staff time it would take compared to what you currently have?
It's a challenge.
Okay.
The vendors will come and tell you, because Salesforce knocking at our door and want to sell us a CRM is what you're talking about, customer relationship management. And we're not going to afford that, clearly. So there's that side of it. I'll tell you that the different heads in the business units across the city like to use the systems that they use every day. They don't want to use another system to put this in, just to put it in the one that they go to every morning.
Right.
So I've heard that from the workforce, which is why I think, maybe a move towards a better answer is that one of the things I want to use out of that Microsoft Premier agreement is to build up some of the analytics products that we have access to, and we can produce reports from across all those systems, so you can at least see what's in them. Maybe we can package that up into an app like we did with 311.
Right.
So, I wanted to do that for years, quite honestly, so that.
Well, I know you've talked about this previously.
Whether you're a building inspector or, whoever, council person, if you could have an app that said, tell me what's going on with this property.
Right.
At the click of a button that pulls it from all those systems, whether it's a complaint or a inspection record. The records are here. It's just we need to tie them together.
No, and that's sort of what I was curious about with that. I am going to reserve any questions that I have concerning the budget memo we just got and your presentation about staff, because I want to take some time to look over this. But would it be possible, and I don't know if this is feasible or not, Matt, so I apologize if it's not, to sort of get an idea as to, when I'm looking at your organizational charts from this year to next year, is it possible to get sort of a description of what you're looking at, even if it's just a one-page description of, these are what these positions previously were responsible for, here's what I want them to be responsible for now and why I want to change these things. Because I'm not an IT professional, so just the title changes and the organizational flowchart change doesn't fully give me the picture as to what you're looking to try to accomplish, and I want to try and better understand that. Would that be possible in the next few days?
Sure.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you, Matt, for your answers and for your detailed presentation. I apologize that I had a number of questions, but I'm trying to understand all this better. I appreciate the intelligence of my colleagues, and thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. Mr. Lugo? Just on page 102 in the 46 account, I see we have another $600,000 from Microsoft. Just wondering if we can claim them as a dependent.
For a long time.
Okay, I have nothing further. Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. President. Matt, I don't want you to feel left out because I did not send you questions in advance. But when I released that report in July, the IT, there were really very few issues with the budget then. I really only have one or two questions now that were kind of minor. We changed the chart of accounts a little bit, so the internet service is now at 22, assuming that the internet circuit provider 1 and 2 is internet service. That should probably be changed to a 22 account. And I noticed from reviewing the expenses in the department that your department has been paying for cable service to Bucky Boyle Park. I don't know if you're, trust me on that. If you're gonna continue to pay that service, then it needs to be budgeted, and it should be also in the 22 account.
Okay, well, we have a line item for RC and cable modems, and you're asking
Yeah,
to move that?
yeah, that's a hardware charge. This is an actual, the Bucky Boyle charge is a service charge. I mean, I'm just telling you, but if you could address those two, the internet circuit provider, which is not a dollar thing, it's just a chart, an account thing, and then maybe you want to take a look at, it's a service electric bill for Bucky Boyle, take a look at that. And either send it to another department, or recognize it in your own budget. That's all. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Matt.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hendricks, go ahead.
Mr. Leiber, I have a question, it's more of a comment. Because of our diminishing personnel with the city, as you know, and I believe that's been already brought to your attention about such as code enforcement, this is where I think your bureau becomes more important than ever. With the fewer people, it's going to be more important than ever that they all begin using computers. And a lot of the work has to come from computer, aided work rather than paperwork. And that's probably going to cut across all bureaus. That is going to increase the workload for your office and decrease it for them personnel-wise as far as what they're going to accomplish over their 8-hour course of the day or however long it is. So again, I also want to commend you for, I've worked with you very closely for the last 5 years. One of the most important project I feel was the Granicus and opening up where these meetings are now broadcast live into the public. And I think there's nothing more important than transparency. So thank you for all you've done and your people. Please pass it on to them. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll move on to the solicitor's office. Okay.
Okay, there's three of us are going to be speaking. I'm going to do some prefatory remarks to try and put our budget in context for the department. Then Fran is going to address the budget itself and be prepared to answer questions. And then after the questions, Juan will have a follow-up to the presentation and to the discussion. There's 3 points I want to make in the prefatory comments. The first is that the solicitor's office is the city's law firm, and we provide services at a fraction of the cost of outside counsel. Second, the office, when working well, serves as a watchdog in all branches, such that a strong, non-political solicitor serves a valuable role in helping maintain the integrity of government. Third, we need your help in doing those first two roles. Going to point one, a cost-efficient law firm. We are the city's general counsel. Our sole client is the city. The office advises all the departments within the city. The office advises the branches of government. The office helps the various parts of our city government achieve goals in conformance with the applicable laws and regulations. We also direct the city's response to legal challenges brought against it. and we bring and fight legal challenges where appropriate. We provide these services at a fraction of the cost that outside legal counsel charges. An appropriately staffed solicitor's office can save the city substantial expenses and legal fees. Now, who decides what an appropriately staffed solicitor's office looks like? Who decides what the long-term goals of this office should be? Who decides what to send to outside counsel? Who implements procedures and budgets to achieve these goals? The solicitor. Article 7 provides that it is the intent of Article 7 of the Home Rule Charter provides that it is the intent of this charter that only one person shall be the legal advisor of the city, not a committee of attorneys, one person, one attorney. We have been without a solicitor for quite some time. We have no one to determine any of these things, let alone the path forward to achieve these different goals. Accordingly, the budget we present is a status quo budget. We have taken the 28 budget and essentially replicated it for 2019. Why? Because we had to. None of the existing members of this office assisted in preparing any of the solicitor's office budgets for the last few years. None of the members of this office were included in any planning of long-term goals the previous solicitors may have had for this office. We are, in a sense, here to justify a budget we had no hand in making. We are here to answer questions about future priorities and goals that we cannot answer because those answers really can only be addressed by the person in charge, the solicitor. We are here to discuss policies and potential policies that are not within our province to make. There are many different paths that could be taken forward with this office. The solicitor chooses among the various paths. We have not had someone to choose the path the office will follow. In the absence of clear direction, we maintain the status quo. Going to point 2, the watchdog function. The city is coming out of a mess. It is a mess that arose, among other things, from the improper infusion of politics into city governance. The Controller's Office and the Solicitor's Office, among other functions, serve as watchdogs on how the city conducts business. The Controller is a watchdog for how the government spends its money. The Solicitor should be a watchdog for how the city exercises its authority. The Solicitor, unfortunately, members of both offices were tied up in this mess. Politics seemingly undercut the watchdog functions. That cannot happen again. That must be fixed. The Controller's Office situation is improved by the addition of a controller who has seemingly taken the full-time watchdog function seriously and who carries it out. That function is critical to the city. The Solicitor's Office is currently staffed with competent and ethical attorneys and paralegals who are, to a person, committed to help the city move forward. We have effectively worked together to help the city navigate the difficult orders it faced this past year, the year with 3 mayors. Our attorneys and paralegals take the advisory and watchdog functions seriously and carry them out to the best of our ability. It is advisable for the office to have a solicitor in charge who takes on the watchdog function fully, who sets appropriate priorities, who is not and will not be influenced by the political winds the city finds itself in. The next year will find another election which may bring vibrant political clashes in May and in November. The city solicitor's office should not have to wait until those potential clashes are decided to get a solicitor in place. The city should not have to wait. Perhaps at any time, but certainly in the present time, and in the immediate future, this office should be above the political storms. A strong, non-political solicitor can help the city move forward in these next few years, certainly until it has a next full-term election for mayor. Point 3, help us to help the city. It is not our place to appoint or approve the solicitor, whether from our own ranks or from outside. It is not our place to budget for a full-time solicitor or to adjust salaries where necessary to retain the expertise we currently have, or to make changes in staffing or in the budgeting for outside counsel. We are looking for a solicitor who is devoted to the task fully, who is close closely aware of the problems that the city faces and who will chart an appropriate course forward for the legal needs of the city, and who is not unduly burdened or shaped by the political forces that blow and that may blow harder in the coming months. This city's watchdog must clearly be focused on the city's interests alone. That watchdog function must not be infused in any manner with politics for one candidate over another or for one party over another. The city is our client. Article 7 of the Home Rule Charter requires the city law firm to be led by one attorney. The position needs to be filled. I reiterate the 3 points. We could provide cost-efficient general counsel for the city. We can operate as the city's watchdog, but we need your help to appoint a qualified, competent, non-political solicitor to help this office fulfill those first 2 points. With that, I'll turn it over to Fran.
Good evening, members of City Council. As Matt indicated, we have a status quo budget prepared for you, and I'd be happy to answer, take any questions and try to answer them.
If no one else has any questions on
I don't have any questions, but we know Mr. Robinson does.
it, we'll have to make up for last week.
I know Mr. Glazier did his best to fill the void when I wasn't here last week, but I still have to try, so. Well, first of all, Mr. Kloiber's discussion leads to my first question, which is the status of appointing a new solicitor, Mr. Mayor.
We have no applicants at this time, okay? Myself and Managing Director will be bringing forth to City Council hopefully in the next several weeks, if not early January, about looking at how we want to run the solicitor's office. Right? I think possibly the days of getting a solicitor who's really part-time, and we've had several over the last many years, okay? I think maybe that time has passed. We have to look at possibly the reorganization of that office. And Joe and I have had preliminary discussions. I think we can better utilize the people we have there, and I'll be bringing the plan to you early January.
I'm just curious if there was a reason why you didn't put it in the budget, if you've been thinking about this for a while. I'm just curious.
Not totally finalized with the plan yet.
Okay, I was just curious.
I have to talk with the solicitor's office as we go forward.
Okay.
They're not knocking down the doors though, no one has, one person has approached us and they basically pulled out from that, area they didn't want to get.
Okay, because
we've had no interest.
I've had almost a dozen lawyers ask me what was going on with it because there was an interest there. So I will get you names.
On your end?
Yes, lawyers that I know who said, what's going on with the solicitor?
Oh.
Either they were interested or they knew someone who was interested. So that's why I was curious.
That's news to me because, I mean,
Well, no one's contacted.
no one has contacted us, but if you
Okay.
have.
It was just sort of, and I don't know if any of my other colleagues have had similar experiences, but just.
The administration will bring a plan to you early January because we are looking at different options to run that office.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask your deferences, consider the fact that the mayor's been in office for less than a year. I'm here 5 months. We're making major possible changes in personnel. And one of the reasons that we took the personnel issue off the table now is to not make the budget process any more complex for you or for the internal staff. So we'll get through the budget process. If you agree with us, then we'll start to deal with those management and personnel issues immediately at the beginning of the year. And that's one of the plans that Mel and I and others have spoken about. And it's no small task to keep everybody on board with that plan, let me tell you. But I have to tell, and I'll repeat what somebody else said, is we're getting great cooperation between the departments and the department directors. Even going to the IT budget that we just talked about. I have department directors who have agreed to put off some of their needs so we can build an IT department that's supports their movement into the future. So we have a lot of irons in the fire that we're trying to coordinate, and this is one. And obviously, this is one we can also talk about when we get to talking about the personnel management issues that will begin next year, as long as, you know, you approve and agree with what we're looking to do.
Okay, Mr. Robinson, we'll talk, forward those names to me.
Happily, you know, we can talk about that, because if we're potentially making a major shift to it, I don't know if that's going to be the same level of interest. Simply because some of these are attorneys who have very successful practices.
Understood.
So, but we'll talk about that. Yeah, because the last sort of the grapevine had was that there was someone in contention that didn't know whether it was gonna work or not. So to my knowledge, it was.
That person.
No, I understand from what you said. I'm just saying. Yeah, that's why it was my very first question, and Mr. Kloiber brought us there. So looking at the 32 account, let me pull up where I am here. The publications and membership. So we're looking at, we had a budgeted amount of $20,000. You only spent 16, and then we're dropping it to 12,570. What are we looking at sort of dropping, and why?
The major contributor to that activity was our changing over our legal software for research.
Okay.
We used to use Westlaw, Thomson Reuters, and we investigated and had a test drive more or less of LexisNexis. And actually the cost is half the amount of Westlaw, and we actually get more resources to do our legal research. So that was the major contributor to that account.
Okay, fantastic. And then could you just touch on the changes that have been made in the 44, 46, and 50 account? Because we obviously see that there's some rather significant changes, looking at going from a zero budget amount to 65,000 in 44, going from 28,000 to zero in the 46 account, and then in the 50 account going from a budget amount that was 46, the A&E is only 18,000, and then it's dropped to 8. So if we could just get sort of an overview as to what the changes were in those accounts.
With regard to those items, 44 and 50, 68, the 44 account and the 50 account, historically, to my understanding, has always been used for outside counsel involving labor matters.
So this is the switch to what we're doing in risk with the $100,000
This is
for.
in coordination with risk,
Okay.
to try to cover items that theirs doesn't. And historically, this has been the way it was done.
Okay. All right. And then the 46 account where we had the 28,000 and now it's down to 0. It's on the bottom of page 11 of the detail book, I'm sorry.
Those two accounts were, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The 44 and 46 account, the other contract services, outside legal counsel, were the ones that were used historically for the labor negotiations and arbitrations. So that has been eliminated and combined after having met with Ms. Wagenhurst and Mr. Hartzell.
Right.
There was, in conformance with Controller Glazer's efforts to get us on a uniform method of recording these budgets items, that was combined. So that's why one went to 0. The 46 went to 0.
Okay. Those are the only questions I had, and just, you know, I said this to Mr. Liebert, and I'm going to also state this to you and everyone in the solicitor's office. This has been an unparalleled year, not just with the changes in government, but also with what you guys have had to deal with in the solicitor's office, and I feel we've been served very well. There's not been any point in time from my perspective that I feel like we've gotten anything but the best level service from the solicitor's office, the best advice, and an attempt to try and navigate a situation that no one in your position should ever have to. So thank you for your hard work and your dedication to the city.
Well, from all of us, we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I will, if there are no further questions, Mr. Controller?
Let me just Make sure, no, nothing over here? We're good? We're good? Mr. Glazer?
Yeah, I just wanted to, you know, I have to commend the legal department because they took to heart the suggestions that were made in the July report and really reorganized their budget in a way that is certainly a model throughout the city, so thank you. I sent some questions to the department earlier. One of them had to do with printing, which Mr. McMahon then sent out a memo saying they'll look at it citywide to rationalize the budget requests. So there were one or two things that still needed to be changed account-wise, and in account 42 in whatever page it is, on page 11, there's a shredding service there that hasn't been used, and Ms. Fruworth, you think that it's that recycling takes care of it for you? Because you're not billed for any shredding.
Candidly, we don't know what.
It's
I
magic.
have not been involved in this process at all.
They shredded all the documentation that the leaders themselves.
I left a message for recycling, so I'll get some clarification on that tomorrow and I'll let you know. But, you know, apparently we can save $600 because we're not paying anybody to shred the legal stuff. And I think that if recycling is doing it, that perhaps HR can have a discussion with them, and maybe they can do away with their outside contractor as well, because they're spending about $1,800 a year shredding. So if it meets your standards for privacy, then hopefully it would meet HR, so we can save a little more money there, bring that in-house. And there's one other question. Legal has, for the past couple of years, budgeted money for Right to Know software. They've been looking at the field and what's out there, and you think in the upcoming year you may be ready to make a purchase?
Yes, we've been investigating, there's a variety of companies, right when the law changed in 2008, we were barraged with solicitations that wanted to manage our Right to Know. We created, to my mind, a really good system of processing those Right to Knows, as many as we get. And so that we're no longer getting interested companies trying to sell software. Recently, we've had some solicitations for what is becoming the newest thing, now the law is 10 years old, for social media being public records. And we've gotten several companies asking us to give us demonstrations on how to capture those and how to create, accounts for those things, which inevitably would involve, my suspicion is IT. So we've been sort of reflecting on those. What we're interested in now, since our office anticipates doing more of the litigation in-house, that we would like to find a tool or a product that will manage and monitor both Right to Know and litigation. So they would have some kind of tickler systems, other types of built-in notice warnings for deadlines, things of that nature. And we're hopeful there's a product out there that exists like that. So we want to seriously and sincerely explore that option this year.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Juan.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, council members, Mr. Mayor, and also Mr. McMahon. I've been asked to basically formulate as a former talk show host used to say, final thoughts. So I'm here to give final thoughts. When the council considers this department's next year's budget. Essentially, Attorney Kluiber mentioned where we've been as a department and where we're at as a department. Attorney Fruworth has submitted to council on behalf of our department where we are with our dollars and cents. My suggestion is to turn the page, so to speak, to figure out what the next steps are. The first step, and I think the elephant in the room, is to have leadership. having leadership on committee, although is sufficient for the time being, we have maintained the best that we can as possible. But I think as the legal department for the city, it's essential that we not only maintain, but we have to advance. We have to stay ahead of the curve, we have to stay ahead of the wave, ahead of the current. In order to do that, there has to be a sole person dictating policy and procedure so that we, as the competent solicitors that we are, and I'm defending the rest of the solicitors in our office, we're able to do our jobs better. We're doing it okay, but we need to do it better. On top of that, when we have the chief solicitor or when the mayor and managing director establish the structure for our office, we'll be able to ascertain vision. Once we ascertain vision, we'll be able to ascertain advancement, which is essentially the necessary component so we can do our job on behalf of the city and on behalf of the various departments. So with that, instead of being reactive, we must be proactive in all essence to advance the cause of protecting the city. So with that, I respectfully ask for you to strongly consider the budget that's been presented as is. And if you have any questions, I'm here, but if not, then I defer to the mayor as far as the next step on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. I have no questions. Anybody else? No? Mr. Glazer? No questions? No. You're off the hook, man. Thank you.
If I might go on, they've been doing a great job by committee, but I agree that they do need the leadership in order to move forward.
We agree with you, and I'm just glad that they're on our payroll, because I would have paid to pay them by the hour. It's already sitting here. So, thank you.
Good job, guys.
Look forward. Mr. Glazer.
Hang on, let me find my page here. Thank you, sir. This is the first time I'm seeing this budget. The controller's department, the controller's bureau, wherever we are, is the smallest in the city. Over the past year or so, we have evolved as a group where there's a lot of back and forth, where everyone supports everyone. We've done some cross-training, and we've stretched our capabilities to do more audits than we've done in the past over broader topics. We've spent some money on training. Jackie Moore, I am happy to say, has become a certified fraud examiner, and we're very proud of that achievement. So that we will have a better idea of what to look for under certain conditions when we do additional audits. The budget really pretty much remains the same as it has been in past years. My salary is limited by charter, and the other increases are in wages are pretty much set by administration. The other accounts are really going to be pretty much the same as they have been in past years. And I have no questions for myself.
I just want to have a question.
Yes, sir.
You're printing, what account is your printing in?
Our printing is where Ms. Wagenhurst put it, which is 26. And if we could probably cut it by $25.
Come on, I can.
That's all right.
Teamwork. All right, do we have any questions by council? People are starting to get punchy here.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
He does a good job. It's hard to, it's not an easy job to do, especially after all we've been through, so, awesome job, sir.
Thank you. Shame you can't get a raise.
Yeah, actually, I agree with that.
I vote for it.
You got a cupcake.
I got a cupcake the other day from Joe.
Yep.
And a sticker.
Claim it on your financial.
And I swiped some pretzels for finance this afternoon.
You actually might want to. Okay, anybody have? I have no questions. Okay, let's move on to the mayor now. now we have all the questions.
Oh, it's very simple. You can turn to pages 23, 24, and 25. I already met with Mr. Glazier, met with Mr. Hartzell, met with Mr. Wagenhurst, and Ms. Patel. And I am cutting my budget, printing by $2,450. That would be 16. And then we're going to go to line item number 46, other contract with services, cutting that in half from 10,000 to 5,000. And then also in line item number 50, we're going to go other service and charges from 6,000 to 4,000. And that's a budget memo 3. If you have any questions on the other account numbers, more than happy to answer those. If you want to go into the detail book, we can go into the detail book. So that's the changes I've made in my budget.
In the detail book.
Okay. Hold on.
4 and 5.
What page, Mr. Ziffel?
Thank you.
4 and 5.
4 and 5, that's where I'm at. Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm just curious where it was.
Oh,
I didn't have any questions, I'm sorry.
okay, yeah, detail 4 and 5.
All right, one question for you here.
Go ahead, sir.
50, your 50 account, other services and charges going from 2,000 to 6,000.
Yep, and I cut 2,000 back to 4,000. Budget memo.
Budget memo.
Yeah,
I think
kind of in between 2 to 6, I put in 4.
Okay,
Mhm.
what does that cover?
Well, miscellaneous expenses I might have, on the service charges, what I have done so far, okay? And I'm very lean, I don't go anywhere, okay? I come to work, do what I gotta do, and, you know, and I enjoy it, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, but, I'm not out on the road, I don't really attend conferences, I might go for a day, you know, seminar here or there. One thing that I've committed to do, and I'll say this publicly, and I have no apologies for this, I do have a city vehicle, but I have not put 1 ounce of city gas in, I pay for my own gas for my city vehicle. I don't think that I'm a hero for doing that, I think it's the right thing to do, because I just feel that it's the right thing to do, and, you know, might save 15, 2,000, 3,000 a year, but I just feel ethically that's what I want to do.
Appreciate that.
It's about me, I volunteered to show them how to use the
Yeah,
bus, where to go to get gas, but.
I think that's more the issue there. Mr. Henry.
No.
You decided not to take me up on it.
I didn't, that's a little green key, right? I didn't even use it, no, I plan to use it. But it's, I mean, look, it's a very lean budget, most of it is, you know, wages, personnel issues, things, personnel wages with that, but, I mean, we gotta do what we gotta do to kind of, you know, keep the city running, and that's what we're doing.
You're gonna go to the mayor's conference?
Where is it? Even when I was at the school district, I'm not a big conference guy. You know, I mean, if it's in New Orleans, you know, maybe. I'm not getting into that. No, I mean, when you get into, what line is that? Training and professional development, you'll see that goes from 2,000, 12,000, that's up. That's not up because of me, that's up because of Ms. McMahon, because, you know, no, seriously, because,
That's all right.
I mean,
But
Joe,
look at the line item for wages, it's
Joe
down
wants,
8,000 for 5 years.
yeah, I mean, Joe wants to go to the P&L, and he did attend a 3-day conference, and those conferences are worthwhile. I'm just not into them. And Joe goes to them, and he brings back information, he shares it, just one he shared with, when he talked to the PIMA director out there, what the emergency management coordinator should be doing in the city, and why we should have one in the city, so things like that. I go back to my original pages, if you look at, you know, USCM, NLC, National League of Cities, what's the USCM? National Mayor's Conference and all, so if I want to go to those, which I probably won't, then I want to send, a point sheet to that, and they're good. You can get a lot from a conference. You can go back and you can share, you know, you hear different speakers, and, I mean, Joe, you went to one, it wasn't only about PIMA, but you heard a good conference on Blight.
Right.
what they did, what, you
Yeah,
know.
what Lancaster has done with some of the rehabilitated neighborhoods and housing in Lancaster.
So you go and you find out what you learned there that you can bring that and affect your city, and that's what it's all about. Anything else?
No, that was more than you needed.
That's probably right. I just, Mr. Glazer, are you going to be gentle?
We're gonna warm up my hands, Fred.
We'll let you go before Mr. Robinson.
Oh, that's fine.
Well, I met with Mayor O'Connell and Brent and Swagenhurst earlier today. I gave them my suggestions. And that is the result of Budget Memo 3, so they've certainly taken them, and the result of some savings for the city. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, you're very welcome, Mr. Glazer.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mayor, I just have a couple questions. And first of all, I just say, I encourage you to maybe go to a couple of those conferences, because the networking that you can build up, especially some of the federal conferences with the opportunity zones we have in the city, I think we need to really try to market those really well. So I would just say maybe give them a second look.
Okay.
So,
That's fair.
because we also don't want them to think that everyone in Allentown is going to talk their ear off the way Mr. McMahon is, so.
That's more than fair. Mr. McLean, we would have a second on that?
It's the pot calling the kettle in my case, so. Just two quick questions. Account 30, the cultural center at Alliance Hall. Why is this being paid out of, and I know this was done before you, so I don't know if maybe you can answer why this is being paid out of the mayor's budget as opposed to somewhere else.
It's the rent.
No, I understand. I know it's the rent. I'm just curious as to why it's coming out of the mayor's budget as opposed to, say, something in community economic development.
I really don't have an answer, just sort of, you know, you did it last year, we just kind of.
Okay.
Brought it right into this year.
I don't know
It's a
if,
good point, though.
Mr. Glazer, do you have any thought on this?
Well, if 30 account is the proper account, I mean, you can certainly have a discussion as to whether this is a general and civic expense, or whether it's a CED expense. We're gonna pay for it one place or another.
Right.
You know, I gather it was an initiative of a prior mayor, and that's why it came out of that expense, that's why it came out of that account. It was not a budgeted expense in the prior year, now it is a budgeted expense.
Right.
So.
And the only other question I have is, count 32, detail line 2, the ICMA membership, I assume that's the City Managers Association?
Yes.
And that's for professional development with your positions? Okay, I figured that's what it was, I just wanted to double check. Those are the only questions I had, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
You're very welcome,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Robinson.
Mr. Zupan, anything? Mr. Hendricks, Ms. Apple? No. Nothing. Okay, let's move on to general and civic.
I guess I take this one on. So, Sean. Starting off at the beginning of the detail on the rentals, that would be a perfectly good place to put it, the rental in for Alliance Hall alongside the municipal garage rent, which would be right on target. That, of course, is for the city garage and for the fleet maintenance type work is what you see as the rentals in there. Not much different in terms of publications and membership from the previous year. We are going to, as part of Memo 3, move the unemployment insurance benefits from account 38 to account 46, which I believe was in line with where Mr. Glazer thought it should go. And we're also in account 46 out of that memo going to remove audit fees in the amount of $21,580 that were redundant because they were already accounted for elsewhere in the budget. So that will be coming out as just a cut from that particular category. I suspect we may actually be cutting a little bit soon on account 50. We're still calculating that because the real estate taxes for some of that property were actually accounted for in other budgets, and so that number is going to be coming down as well. It's beginning with account 50 that you're going to start seeing some of the rather significant items that are in general and civic that are new for this year. We have included this year the stormwater fee as a cash amount to move over from the general fund to the stormwater fund, as it shows the requirement of the city that it's paying its own bills with respect to the stormwater fee.
You see in that line item also the job study salary allocation, as Mel had said a while ago, the consultant on the job study, as they're getting that finished, had indicated that a pool of somewhere around 3% of the salary value of the positions that were involved in the job study should be included once the job study is complete, to indicate a possible arrangement of how of dollars in line with what the compensation study says. That obviously would be brought back in front of you at the time that it would come up, because that's a very serious issue that we would need to work together on to be sure that we did it right. The account 78 for contingencies, as you can see, 55 briefly, by the way, is for property repairs on properties that we already rent out as a city, that we actually have more than enough revenue from the rent that we pay out that covers those, so that's where the revenue is going to be supporting those expenses, just to make sure that we can keep our property up appropriately and timely in a safe manner. The contingency funds, it is no surprise to any of us that the finance department budget in previous years often had items in it in the administration area that were used for purposes of dealing with contingencies during the course of the year when they popped up. Those things are going to happen. We don't know when something is like a malware issue, for example, or something else, hopefully that won't be that bad, that will pop up. We wanted to make this a very transparent indicator that there would be monies sitting here that would be clearly used if there was an emergency that were needed, and we would obviously bring those in front of you for approval at those times when the situation called for it. Account 84 is new this year because the capital fund transfers, we've had capital budgets that we've had in recent years, because we've had obviously loans, short-term loans, bonds, whatever, that we've been paying capital expenses out of for this year. That won't be the case, other than the short-term loan that just went out. And so these costs are coming out of the operating budget this year, so this is not intended to be a long-term solution, but there are capital needs that need to be taken care of. And that's why we have them sitting in the general and civic budget, so that you can see them in detail. And then, of course, the interfund transfers, which includes the risk fund transfers, the amount that we pay for debt service, and for other transfers to the equipment fund to cover IT and lease payment needs. And that is fairly standard from what you've seen in previous years. So the biggest dollar item increases are no doubt the allocation based on the job study plus the capital fund contribution, but everything else is fairly consistent with what the general and civic category has had in the past.
Okay, the job study allocation, you were talking about $340,000 there, that's to adjust for any increases that the job study made.
Exactly, that would only happen after the job study was complete and a determination was made based upon the non-bargaining positions as to where they aligned with what the study determined. And at that point, we would be working collaboratively with you to make a determination on how that money would be allocated.
I'm going to throw a hypothetical, hopefully this isn't in the job study. I mean, can I ask why we just didn't hold off? If the job study is going to be done in December, we probably could have had this looked at and any adjustments to salaries implemented by early next year, right?
And I think that's what we're looking at.
Well, then why didn't we just hold off? And I'm not saying people don't deserve it, but why didn't we just hold off on the raises until we had the job study? Then we could do it all. I mean, we could pass the budget with this in it, and we could do it all in the beginning of the year. Hypothetically, what if the job study says that somebody should get less money?
Typically, what's happened in the past job studies, in my experience, and I was here for probably 3 of them, is they get frozen where they are, and the salaries increase when they get to the point that increase has got them to the point where they'll start to move up. But typically, when somebody's above where they should fall in line with a new study, a lot of times they're frozen at that level.
Which would make sense.
Yes.
But just the question I had.
Well, if you think of it this way, Roger, in some respects, it's a placeholder, so you know what the total budget is moving into next year.
I understand that, Joe. I'm just saying, if we should get to that situation where the job study says somebody should be paying less, we're not paying them more, and we just gave them a raise besides. You following me?
Yeah.
That's all. That's all.
Yeah,
It's too late, it's done.
Definitely understood where you're going, Mr. McLean, and I think it was to be sure that, given what likely could come out of the job study, that there was a pool of money available there to deal with those changes and that we had it in place.
Okay, that's it. Anybody else from council?
Thank you, Mr. President.
I didn't acknowledge you.
I was gonna speak anyway, so. Mr. Hartzell, couple of questions for you. Can you, talk about account 44? So we're looking at, where am I here? Make sure I'm looking at the right number. Yes, so the unbudgeted legal counsel that is not covered by risk management. Can you talk about what we're referring to?
In that instance, I was just talking with Ms. Wagenhurst about that. A perfect example, I think, would be if we were bringing in somebody on a matter like the trust issue, for example, which that may not be the best example, because it's something that is dealing with potential legal aspects. But anything that would pop up that wouldn't necessarily involve a settlement or a claim, some things in which professional services would be needed during the course of the year that would not involve a lawsuit, et cetera, that's where we had perceived an appropriate place to put that into general and civic as just kind of an overall holder to say that there are certain things we will need to draw upon outside counsel for in the course of the year that are not dealing with the risk issues.
Okay. In account 46, line detail 3, the parking authority, can you talk a little bit more about if you feel we're going to be in a better position this year to get the reimbursement?
Yeah, we're going to, that's another issue that I'm still looking at the total dollar amount on that one, because I'm not sure actually that 125 is going to be enough to cover the expenses that we have for the year. So I'm still looking at that one particularly, but we were trying to land that one in a place given what our normal expense pattern has been in the last year. We pay for a different set of costs from what we did a couple years ago. I may need to look that line over one more time to determine if that number's gonna have to go up a little bit.
Okay. The job study salary allocation, in line 50.
Yeah.
So we've established that this is independent of the raises that are in the existing budget. So my question is, if the job study comes back and we have more money allocated, I assume this is gonna be put back into the unencumbered balance, whatever's remaining from there, once we're done with the allocation.
Yes, that would be the intention. It wouldn't be to spend the entire thing. If the compensation study indicated we didn't need that much, then yes, indeed, the rest of it would go into cash reserves.
Okay, and I don't know if this is a question that you can answer, Mr. Hartzell, but has there been any consideration given to if the job study comes back and shows that that might not be enough money, as to what then the course of action would be in terms of allocations of salaries?
We went with a number that the consultant recommended for us, which was 3% of salary, as a good yardstick for it.
Okay. 78, the contingency fund. Is this going to help us at all? I know it's not part of the cash balance, but is this going to be something that you believe might have some positive impact on our bond rating and our financial outlook?
It couldn't hurt.
Not much could at this point.
I think having it there is a good sense of transparency and being aware that if there is an emergency that requires something, that having it very clearly there is a good thing.
Okay, and I'm totally in support of it, and I know this is something that Mr. Glazier's been talking about for a while. I just am curious if we're getting sort of as much bang for our buck in having it in that account as opposed to adding $150,000 to the unencumbered cash balance. That's my concern with that.
And it is obviously something that we would be very careful to even recommend spending to begin with, and we let you all be aware when that time came if we thought it was necessary to go to that point and get your concurrence on it.
Okay. In the capital projects allocation, where was I going? This is something, again, if you're not able to answer this because it's a parks project, if we can maybe get an answer. the scorers tables and shade structures for the scorers tables for the citywide parks and playgrounds, are those permanent structures that are being built in those particular parks? Because I'm curious as to why that is in a capital fund contribution if it's not permanent as opposed to an equipment allocation, if they're mobile.
Yeah, I would assume that it's permanent, I would assume because of the dollar amount.
Yeah, I would defer to speak with Parks on that one.
Okay, can we get an answer to that?
Yeah.
Thank you. When we go to the bottom, the LCA projects, the automatic meter reader project, 100,000, that's a whole other story.
And it should be 110, but
110.
so we add up to 480,
Okay.
yes.
And I'm gonna ask Mr. McMahon, since he will know to explain the second project, the inoperable valve project. But with the automatic meter reader, project, I know there was a small number of homes that was left. Is this going to cover those remaining homes, or are we looking at this continuing to be an expense in budget years moving forward?
There was a set aside that was required out of the concession lease for projects that were in the process of being completed at the time, and that's what these particular projects are for. I know with the inoperable valve project that I would expect a continuation of that into 2020, as to finish paying out what that part of the uncompleted work is. I'm not sure on AMR. Do you have any?
About 220 on the valve project,
Okay.
2020.
Uh-huh.
AMR, is that under 60 or 70,000?
For 2020.
2020.
Okay, so both of them will have a little left over in 2020, and then that'll be done.
Excellent. And then I just had a quick question on the interfund transfers, line items 5 and 6. The transfer to equipment fund for IT equipment replacement and the transfer to equipment fund for police IT equipment.
Yes.
Just a curiosity as to what those are. And I don't know if Mr. Liber maybe could answer that.
Sure, off the top of my head.
If not, if you could maybe just get us an answer.
We'll get you something more specific on that. Traditionally, the equipment fund has been utilized for those particular types of IT improvements during the course of the year, and we can get some more detail on that shortly.
That'd be great. Thank you very much, Mr. Hartzell, and thank you, Mr. President.
Hold on. Go back to account or Fund 083, the equipment fund, in the detail book. Yep. You can see the detail right there. As Ms. Wagenhurst has pointed out to me, it is in specifics right there for the police IT equipment and then a general category for IT equipment replacement.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Blazer.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, once again, I met with Mr. Hartzell and Mayor O'Connell earlier, and some of what we discussed is in budget memo 3 under general and civic, where there were some reductions. So the controller's office had a good day today, and so did the city taxpayers.
Thank you, sir. All right, any questions? Any more questions? All right, city council budget. There it is, who has questions? Courtney, you want to ask us any questions?
No, I think I'm pretty good on that, so.
Just wait for Clay. He'll get his chance. Just wondered if you guys, we're gonna give you guys a shot too, you know?
Yeah, turnabout's fair play.
Yes. Mr. Glade.
I have no questions.
Okay, I knew if we got late enough, the questions would die off. But at this point, I'm gonna open it up to the public from any of the budgets we discussed tonight.
They're all gone.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have one.
It's too brutal.
I think it's still, yeah. Nobody,
Past their bedtime.
Seeing nobody?
All right.
And also, our heating bill expenses are going down also because it's freezing in here. I know, my skin is very thin, but I'm freezing. I'm cold. I'm cold. Emily, you got your coat on, didn't you?
Put it on like 2 hours ago.
I'm gonna adjourn this meeting unless anybody has anything else. Let's get out of here.
Thank you.
Me.
Barbara.